He said he would marry me, giving me a phoenix crown and robes. But in the end, he broke his promise. He fell off a cliff, lost his memory, and was saved by a young woman. He knelt before the throne for 3 days, vowing to break our engagement and marry her instead. The emperor, troubled, summoned me to ask for my opinion. I knelt gracefully, trying my best not to let my tears fall. As His Highness, the Crown Prince wishes. My wedding to the Crown Prince was approaching. Every day, I was confined to my chambers by the matron, embroidering my wedding gown. Even a glance at a passing sparrow in the sky would earn me a lengthy lecture. Miss, what is so interesting about the sparrows in the sky? The phoenix in your hands is the most precious thing. In my hands, the half-embroidered phoenix on the wedding gown had magnificent, proud, and lively wings. After more than half a year of work, it was finally nearing completion. An exquisite and perfect wedding gown, just like me. I am the legitimate daughter of the Jing family. My father is the prime minister, and my grandfather was the former grand tutor. Our family is of noble standing, and I, Cordelia Jiang, am naturally the most outstanding among the young ladies of the capital. Accordingly, my upbringing was extremely strict. I had to be proficient in the 4 arts: zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. My father even hired a matron from the palace to teach me. She was so strict. Once I become the crown princess, she won't be able to control me anymore. I'll raise a flock of sparrows in the Eastern Palace. But thinking of the crown prince, I felt that being made to embroider my wedding gown every day wasn't so bad after all. Crown Prince Alaric and I were childhood sweethearts. He was a man of noble character, a gentleman, an immortal banished to the mortal realm. As the emperor's only legitimate son, Alaric was made crown prince at a young age and raised according to the standards of an heir apparent. He excelled in all the 6 arts: rites, music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy, and mathematics. He was refined, benevolent, and deeply loved by the court and the people. He was the perfect crown prince, and I was the perfect future crown princess. Our engagement was known throughout the land. No one could have predicted that such a perfect match would one day be ruined. The day I finally finished embroidering my wedding gown, the matron rushed in, frantic, saying that the crown prince had been ambushed and had fallen off a cliff while overseeing flood control work outside the capital. He had been missing for a day. My hand trembled, and the needle pricked my fingertip. A drop of blood fell onto the phoenix's wing. The situation was urgent, so I had no time to worry about a drop of blood. I hurried out to find my father and get more information. My father comforted me, saying that the cliff wasn't high and that the emperor had already sent people to search for him. For the next few days, I barely slept, praying day and night for the crown prince's safety. Perhaps my incessant chatter annoyed the bodhisattvas, because the crown prince was not found until a month later. I heard he was seriously injured and had not yet fully recovered. I was overjoyed. Forgetting my usual practice of changing into exquisite clothes and jewelry, I went to the palace in the plain clothes I was wearing from the prayer hall. I was a frequent visitor to the Eastern Palace. I even had a token that allowed me to enter and exit the palace and the Eastern Palace freely. So I made my way to the Crown Prince's hall without any hindrance. But I was unexpectedly stopped. The captain of the Eastern Palace Guards, a man named Leo, stopped me, saying with difficulty, "Miss Jiang, the smell of blood inside is strong. It is better if you don't go in." He was an honest and simple man, and after saying this, he became flustered, as if he had done something wrong. I sensed that something was amiss with his attitude. I curtsied gracefully. "Captain Leo, I am the Crown Prince's future wife. He is injured, so I must see him. I am not afraid of the smell of blood. Please let me in." Leo couldn't come up with any more reasons to stop me and stepped aside with a strange expression. I maintained a composed demeanor, but my heart was racing. I pushed open the door and saw a charming young woman holding a bowl of medicine and a spoon, feeding the crown prince spoonful by spoonful. I froze. The woman had her back to me and didn't notice my presence at first. But the crown prince saw me and looked at me with a strange and guarded expression. "Who are you? How dare you trespass in the Eastern Palace?" Why was he asking me this? Did he not remember me? A sense of panic rose within me, but I still maintained the elegant demeanor of a noble lady. Brother Alaric, I am your fiancée, the legitimate daughter of the Zhang family, Cordelia Zhang. But his face turned pale in an instant. He didn't look at me again and quickly explained to the young woman, Serafina, I don't know her. I don't like her. Don't misunderstand. He asked me who I was. He called her Serafina. The difference in intimacy was clear. The young woman beside him also looked at me, and I finally saw her face clearly. She had almond eyes and cherry lips, her features as clean as an innocent child's. Though not as beautiful as me, she had a certain charm. Seeing me, her eyes dimmed, and she murmured, So you have a fiancé. Then she said helplessly, Maybe I should go out first. She placed the half-empty bowl of medicine in my hands and was about to leave, but the Crown Prince stopped her. The Crown Prince took the bowl from me and drank the rest of the medicine in one gulp, without any of the patience he had shown when she was feeding him spoonful by spoonful. He gave her a gentle, reassuring smile, but his expression was blank when he turned to me. He was naturally gentle and polite, and even when he said cruel things, his voice was soft and gentle. Miss Zhang, I fell from a cliff and lost my memory. It was Serafina who saved me. Serafina and I are in love. She is the only one I will ever consider my future wife. He spoke word by word. I have only just learned of our engagement. I have forgotten everything from the past. Let us consider this engagement null and void. He had lost his memory. He didn't remember me. How could this be? I excused myself with a pale face, stumbling slightly but steadying myself without a trace. I went out of the hall and found Leo. What happened to the Crown Prince? Leo was one of the men who had searched for the Crown Prince. I wanted to know the full story of how he was found. Seeing my stern face, Leo didn't dare to hide anything and told me what had happened. The Crown Prince had fallen from a cliff and been washed downstream by the river. There was a folk doctor's household there, and his young daughter, who was in her late teens, had found the seriously injured Crown Prince while gathering herbs in the mountains, and had taken him back and revived him. The girl was born in March when the cherry blossoms were in full bloom, so she was named Serafina. The Crown Prince had lost his memory, and Serafina had saved his life, so it was only natural that he would fall in love with her. When they found the Crown Prince, he insisted on bringing the girl back with him, and would only let her feed him his medicine. My heart grew colder and colder. I returned to the Jiang residence in a daze. A few days later, news spread that the Crown Prince had brought back a commoner girl. A few days after that, the Crown Prince knelt before the Emperor, begging him to cancel our engagement. The news that the Crown Prince had fallen in love with a young healer and wanted to break off his engagement with the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family spread like wildfire through the capital. The other daughters of the Jiang family didn't even dare to leave the house for fear of being laughed at. I shut myself in my room and didn't even step into the courtyard. My mother came in with a bowl of red bean and lotus seed soup, her face full of worry. Cordelia, you haven't eaten much lately. Have some of this? I shook my head. Mother, I have no appetite. After a pause, I couldn't help but ask, Is the Crown Prince still kneeling before the Emperor? It had been almost 3 days, and it was raining today. His injuries hadn't fully healed. How could he bear it? My mother changed the subject, and I knew that the Crown Prince was still kneeling, trying to force the Emperor to give in. I took the soup and tasted a spoonful numbly. It was sweet, perfectly sweet, but my heart was sour, and so was my nose. I drank the bowl of soup without tasting it, which seemed to reassure my mother a little. I put down the bowl and said with determination, Mother, I'm going to the palace. My mother couldn't stop me. When I arrived at the palace, I saw the Crown Prince kneeling in the rain from a distance. His back was straight, his long robes soaked, no longer as elegant as a flowing cloud or a mountain mist. I took the umbrella from the maid and went to hold it over him. It was a rare moment to look down on him. He was still handsome, with a high nose and deep-set eyes, but he felt so unfamiliar. His face was so pale. He was so weak, yet he hadn't given up. That familiar pang of heartache returned. He glanced at me but didn't look at me. His gaze fixed straight ahead, his voice cold and clear. "Miss Zhang, there is no need to hold an umbrella for me." I didn't move, so he shifted to the side, into the rain. This deliberate avoidance made me feel embarrassed. He used to smile at me, saying he would only marry me, for a lifetime. Only me. Now he was kneeling before the throne for so long, to abandon me and marry another. I tried my best to ignore the sourness in my heart and asked him, cautiously and hopefully, "I'll take a step back. Let her be a concubine. Just stop kneeling, please." Given her family background, being a crown prince's concubine was already a great honor. His eyes were emotionless, and he spoke without room for argument. "She is the woman I love. She cannot be a concubine. Whoever I love, it will be for a lifetime. One person." A lifetime, one person. I wanted to laugh, and I wanted to cry. Cordelia Jiang, how ridiculous and pathetic. I looked up at the rain, at the dark clouds overhead. I watched for a long time, and when I had finally calmed down, the Emperor's attendant summoned me. I entered the hall. The Emperor seemed to have expected me. His wrinkled face was full of frustration and disappointment. He berated the crown prince in front of me, saying that he had always been sensible, but now he was bewitched by a commoner girl. Finally, he asked for my opinion. My opinion. If I insisted on marrying the crown prince, I would probably not be well received, right? What was the point? If I agreed to break the engagement, I would become a laughingstock and would never be able to find a suitable husband from a good family again. He used to be the one who would solve all my problems the moment he saw me frown. Now he was the one who had put me in this difficult position. The current crown prince did not love me. I finally understood that. I gave the Emperor a grand curtsy, kneeling gracefully, and said, solemnly and word by word, "As His Highness the Crown Prince wishes." I tried my best not to let my tears fall. I am the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family. I must always be graceful and poised. Tears are a sign of weakness, of being unladylike. The Emperor issued an oral edict, canceling my engagement to the Crown Prince, but that was all. He did not agree to let that woman be the Crown Princess. After all, in terms of family background, appearance, talent, and virtue, she was not worthy of that position. She couldn't even be a concubine. The matron continued to chatter. "Miss, don't be sad. The Crown Prince is just temporarily bewitched by a vixen. I hear the head of the Imperial Medical Academy has already sent a letter to his master, who is traveling, asking him to come back and treat the Crown Prince. With the old physician's help, the Crown Prince's amnesia will be cured in no time. Miss, no one is more suitable to be the Crown Princess than you. The Crown Princess is the future Empress. It is not a game of house where you can choose whoever you like. Once the Crown Prince gets over this impulsive phase, he will surely come back to you. Don't worry, that little slut will be a concubine at most. Miss, oh miss, you can't cut the wedding gown. You've been embroidering it for almost a year." The matron snatched the wedding gown from my hands and held it behind her back, refusing to let me touch it. I held the scissors. "This gown is made for a crown princess. I have no use for it anymore. What is the point of keeping it?" The matron didn't listen to me and carefully put the gown away as if it were a treasure. She still held out hope for my marriage. In fact, it wasn't just her. My parents, my relatives, and even the Emperor and Empress in the palace still held out hope that he would come back to me. After all, Alaric and I had been together for so many years. It was hard for anyone to accept that it was all over just like that. But they hadn't considered that, even if Alaric did come back, I wouldn't. I put down the scissors and raised my hand slightly, as if to clutch my heart. It ached, but my mind was clear and firm. Alaric and I could never go back to the way we were. Even if he did regain his memory one day, we couldn't go back. The rift had been created, and it could not be healed. I was raised to be perfect. I would not love a person or a thing that was no longer perfect, like that wedding gown, with the phoenix wings stained and dirtied with blood, like the crown prince himself. A few days later, Leo came to the Prime Minister's residence with a group of men, carrying a pile of boxes. When he saw me, his face turned red, and he looked very embarrassed. Miss Jiang, the Crown Prince said that since we have parted ways, the Eastern Palace should not keep the things you sent. He doesn't want Miss Q to be upset. Since I was engaged, my mother had instructed me to often make clothes and sachets and send them to the Eastern Palace and the Central Palace to show the filial piety of the Jiang family's legitimate daughter. Over the years, I had sent quite a few things to the palace. Looking at the boxes, they were a bit of an eyesore. I smiled wryly. The Crown Prince is very thoughtful. Leo scratched his head, not knowing what to say. Looking at those things, I suddenly remembered many old stories. When I was 1 year old at my 1-year-old Drajo ceremony, I ignored all the dazzling treasures on the table, stumbled and kicked away many precious items, crawled from one end to the other, and then hugged the 6-year-old Alaric. All the elders and distinguished guests were amused. They joked that I had made a good choice, picking the most precious, grasping the 1-year-old gift in the world. From then on, Alaric and I were deeply connected. He had been a part of so much of my early life. Perhaps my gaze was too dim. Leo hesitantly called out to me, "Miss Jiang." I came back to my senses, my gaze sweeping over the old objects again and again. After a long time, I said, "Since we have parted ways, the Crown Prince should have come in person to show his sincerity. You may go back." I turned and entered the Jiang residence, not giving Leo a chance to stop me. My personal maid, Beatrice, was furious. "Miss, why did you let them take them back? We could have sold them or given them to beggars, but not to them." I shook my head. "Most of those things have the imperial mark on them. Commoners can't use them." A few days later, the door of the Jiang residence was knocked on again. The Crown Prince stood there, his expression cold. Behind him, Leo and his men were carrying the same pile of boxes. He looked at me with a blank expression. "I have come in person. Are you satisfied?" The Crown Prince stood outside the door, tall and slender. The sunlight shone on his moon-white robes, but it could not warm his coldness. I curtsied, "Greetings, Your Highness." Then I still didn't let Leo in. I glanced behind me, and Beatrice came hurrying with a register. I looked at the Crown Prince. The Jiang residence also has many old things from the Eastern Palace. I have had them sorted overnight. Your Highness can take them all back. As I spoke, the main gate behind me slowly opened, revealing a collection of boxes of all sizes. To the astonishment of Leo and his men, I took the register from Beatrice and handed it to the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince finally looked at me seriously, but he didn't take it. "I don't need these things. You can dispose of them as you see fit." I didn't insist. I handed the register back to Beatrice and said faintly, "I don't need these old things from Your Highness either. Why don't we find a place and throw them all away?" Then, to the even greater astonishment of Leo and his men, I smiled sweetly. "How about throwing them into the Yun River, Your Highness?" The Crown Prince's eyes flickered. Perhaps he didn't know what I was planning, but he didn't object. The Prime Minister's carriage slowly approached. I said to the Crown Prince, "I'm afraid you'll have to ride with me for a while, Your Highness." He said nothing and got into the carriage, his gaze fixed on the window. I sat on the other side, as far away from him as possible, and also lifted the curtain to look out at the street. The carriage drove through the bustling market, moving slowly forward. Someone recognized the Prime Minister's carriage, and more people looked at us with strange expressions, pointing and whispering. "Look, that is the Jiang family's carriage." The Jiang family? The one whose daughter was rejected by the Crown Prince. Fragments of conversation reached my ears. I lowered the curtain and looked at the hem of my skirt in silence. The Crown Prince had also heard the whispers. He looked back at me and said apologetically, "I didn't know they were spreading such rumors. I'll send someone to." I looked up at him. "It is fine." We traveled in silence. When we arrived, I got out of the carriage, and the view suddenly opened up. A high cliff stood tall, covered in lush vegetation. Looking down, The Yun River flowed vast and wide, its waves rolling. This was the upper reaches of the Yun River, on top of a cliff. The same place where Alaric had been ambushed and had fallen into the water. The wind was strong on the cliff. The long wind blew, whipping our robes. I looked into the Crown Prince's eyes. It was only then that I realized Alaric had peach blossom eyes. But those naturally amorous eyes, on him, were filled with a deep, heartless coldness. Before, when he looked at me, there was affection. When he looked at others, there was none. Now, when he looked at others, there was affection. When he looked at me, there was none. Beneath his gentle expression was a cold indifference. I clutched my aching heart, lowered my gaze to the ground, and when I looked up again, a single crystal tear rolled down my cheek, leaving a faint tickle in its wake. I smiled wryly. "Your Highness, I was always strictly brought up. Once, as a child, I cried in front of everyone, and was punished by having to copy books for days, and getting my hands slapped. You felt sorry for me then, and told me many jokes to cheer me up. The older I got, the better I became at hiding my emotions. Only in front of you could I laugh, scold, and show all my feelings without restraint." The Crown Prince stood against the wind, his eyes showing no pity, only a hint of unease. "That is all in the past. Why bring it up again?" My tears flowed faster, like a broken string of pearls soaking my collar. My voice choked with sobs. "Your Highness, are you not afraid that one day you will remember the past and regret it?" he said. "I have never regretted." I covered my face and cried for a long time. He stood there for just as long, surprisingly patient. He had always been like that, unhurried and indifferent, cold and unfeeling at his core. After a good cry, I slowly stopped. I took out a pair of scissors from somewhere, the same pair I had wanted to use on the wedding gown, but had been stopped by the matron. I composed myself. "I'm sorry to have kept you waiting, Your Highness. I will try to control my emotions in the future." Alaric and I had known each other for too long. My heart was not made of stone. I couldn't just let go. But every time it ached, I could let go a little more. The deeper the pain, the clearer my mind. Sooner or later, I would be able to face him with equanimity. I had someone open the box and picked up a good luck charm. "This is the good luck charm I climbed thousands of steps to a temple to get for Your Highness before you went to oversee the flood control work." The Crown Prince looked at me. I casually tossed the charm off the cliff. "It is useless now. Let it go. Whoever finds it will have good luck." A look of surprise crossed the Crown Prince's eyes. I picked up a gold-threaded handkerchief. "This was when Your Highness won the autumn hunt and insisted that I wipe your brow. You even kept my handkerchief." I cut off the ginger flower embroidered on the handkerchief, which was a symbol of my family's identity, and let it go. The wind carried the light silk handkerchief into the sky, where it twirled and then floated down into the rushing river. "At least it is embroidered with gold thread. If it floats downstream and is found by the villagers, they can sell it for a few silver coins to buy some meat." I took out a stack of paper from the box, and seeing the words on it, I smiled. When I was a child, the first character I learned to write was Alaric. You taught me yourself. After all these years, you still kept these old papers. I tore the stack of paper into shreds and tossed them into the air. The white scraps fluttered in the wind and were carried away. A box of useless things, picked out by Beatrice, that couldn't be pawned or given away. I threw them all off the cliff, one by one. Finally, I picked up a lock of my hair. Thought it was a bit much. Felt sorry for my hair, put some back, and cut it with the scissors. Perhaps my unexpected actions today, or perhaps the memories brought back by the old objects, had moved him. The Crown Prince looked at me with a complicated expression. I met his gaze. "Your Highness, you said you would never regret it. If you do regret it in the future, don't come looking for me." "I won't," he replied. I smiled faintly. But then my mood soured. I emotionlessly let go of the lock of hair, and it floated away, falling into the river. I tossed the scissors in my hand, and from a distance I saw them hit the water. The splash was swallowed up by the rolling waves. Not even a ripple was made. I stood on the high cliff, looking at the distant green mountains, like wisps of dust. The long river flows from the heavens, rushing to the sea, never to return. He watched me the whole time. Finally, he sighed in resignation. Miss Zhang, are you done with your tantrum? I was as calm as water. I am not having a tantrum. I lifted my skirt and got into the carriage, my voice carried away by the cold wind. I'll just pretend my brother Alaric never came back, that he died here and was never found. Such a rebellious thing to say as a cautious and prudent member of the Zhang family. I would never say it out loud, but I had just been jilted. The crown prince felt guilty towards me, and so did the emperor and empress. This was one of the few times I could be willful. So the crown prince just turned pale, a little embarrassed but said nothing. On the way back, he got his own horse and didn't ride with me. I didn't look at him anymore. I thought of Beatrice. She should be done by now. Sure enough, when we got back to the city, Beatrice came to greet me, her eyes shining as she reported her success. Miss, I've already pawned the rest of the things and exchanged them for several baskets of copper coins at the bank. Beatrice was always so happy when it came to business. She was the daughter of a merchant, sent to be my personal maid and manage my accounts. She was obsessed with money. When we left the city, the things that could be sold were loaded onto a separate cart, and she took them to be exchanged for copper coins. In such a short time, she had handled everything perfectly. I praised her, and she smiled so wide her eyes disappeared. I twirled a jade pendant in my hand and said nonchalantly, "Distribute the copper coins to the beggars and the common people on the street." Beatrice, upon receiving the order, didn't just go and distribute the coins. Instead, she somehow got a gong and with a loud clang-clang, attracted the attention of the people on the street. A crowd soon gathered. Beatrice shouted, "My lady is in a joyous mood and is sharing her wealth to spread the good fortune." My hand paused. I looked at the crowd outside. The crown prince also looked over. Beatrice had the servants scatter the copper coins like water along the street, shouting, "To celebrate my lady's upcoming coming-of-age ceremony." A wave of coins was scattered, and the crowd rushed to catch them, shouting auspicious words, "To celebrate my lady growing more beautiful every day." Another half-basket of coins was scattered. The residents nearby heard the commotion and also came to catch them. The crowd grew larger and larger. My carriage and the crown prince were surrounded, unable to move. Every time she scattered the coins, Beatrice would make up a new, nonsensical reason. In the middle of it all, she slipped in a rebellious phrase, "To celebrate my lady's newfound freedom, and the fact that she can now choose from all the handsome men in the court." No one noticed, but she had successfully and inadvertently revealed my identity. The people who had received the money all praised the Jiang family's daughter for her kindness. When we had arrived, people had pointed and whispered when they saw the Jiang family's carriage. Now, their tone had changed. They said that the Jiang family's daughter would be a blessing to any family she married into, and that the royal family had made a mistake. The change in public opinion was expected, but I hadn't expected Beatrice to be so bold as to publicly announce my newfound freedom. I looked at the crown prince. He was on a white horse, pushed to the side by the crowd. His guards were struggling to keep the people back. He must have heard that line. He didn't look happy. I smiled. So be it. Let Beatrice do as she pleased. After all, I had planned to be a little willful myself. A casual glance caught a familiar figure. I looked closer and saw it was Serafina. She was at the edge of the crowd, seemingly unaware of what was happening in front. But when some coins were scattered in her direction, she joined the others in picking them up. When the commotion died down and the crowd dispersed, the crown prince also noticed her. He went over and pulled her up, his face unusually dark. "What are you doing here?" I also got out of the carriage and went over. Serafina was embarrassed to see us. She clutched a few copper coins in her hand, not knowing where to put them. I came to find you." The crown prince told her to throw away the coins, and she dropped them as if they were hot coals. My voice was gentle. "Miss Ku, you don't have to mind a few coins. I have something more valuable to give you. I held out my hand. In my palm lay a jade pendant with a dragon design. The milky white jade had wisps of smoky purple running through it. The carving was exquisite, the coiling dragon so lifelike it seemed to be moving. This was the betrothal gift between me and His Highness. When Alaric and I were engaged, he had specially commissioned the best jade carver, personally sought out a rare piece of smoky purple jade, and even drew the design himself to have a pair of dragon and phoenix pendants carved. When fitted together, they formed a single seamless piece, a true work of art. I wore the dragon pendant. He wore the phoenix. He hadn't worn his phoenix pendant in a long time. I handed the dragon pendant to Seraphina, but she hesitated, not daring to take it. Her eyes darted back and forth to the crown prince, hoping for some guidance. The crown prince took the pendant from me and looked at it with a puzzled expression, perhaps not knowing that there was a betrothal gift. Seraphina looked at the beautiful jade pendant with longing. Can I see it? The crown prince casually handed her the pendant. The other half of the pendant, I may have dropped it in the river. I will return it to you another day, Miss Zhang, I said. There is no need. You had it carved, so you should keep it. Just as I was about to leave, Seraphina, fumbling with the pendant, accidentally triggered a small mechanism, and the entire dragon pendant shattered into a handful of pieces. She froze, at a loss. The crystal-clear, milky white fragments scattered on the ground, making a soft, crisp sound. Seraphina's eyes immediately filled with tears, and she was at a loss for words. I didn't mean to, Beatrice said sarcastically. Yes, you just suddenly became incredibly strong. I told her to be quiet with a headache and said helplessly, that must have been the mechanism in the pendant. When Alaric had given me the pendant, he had raised his eyebrows and said with a smile that it was unique in all the world, carved by the most skilled artisan, with a complex and ingenious mechanism inside. If anyone else wore it, it would not be happy. I thought he was joking at the time, but I never expected that an artisan could really carve such a pendant. But this pendant no longer belonged to me. If it was broken, it was broken. I didn't really care. The person who had given it to me had forgotten about it himself. I glanced at him nonchalantly. The crown prince stared at the scattered pieces of jade on the ground, a dazed look on his face. He seemed to be in a trance, and for some reason, a sense of panic washed over him. After a long moment, he rubbed his brow and sighed. If it is broken, it is broken. Autumn gave way to winter, and the world was covered in a blanket of snow. Without the title of future crown princess, the burden on my shoulders suddenly lightened. I spent a few months in quiet seclusion in my mansion, but my mother, thinking I was too heartbroken, urged me to go out and get some fresh air. She picked out a particularly exquisite and luxurious invitation from a pile. The imperial consort is hosting a plum blossom viewing banquet at the 10-mile Plum Blossom Bank in the suburbs. I took the branch of red plum blossoms that had been sent with the invitation. The faint fragrance of the plum blossoms clung to the double petals. The imperial consort's status was second only to the empress. She had a son, the first prince, who was a few years older than the crown prince and had been given the title of Prince of Sheng. Alaric had been the heir apparent since childhood and had always been favored by the emperor, keeping his other brothers in check. The consort and the first prince had always been well behaved. Now that the crown prince had lost his memory, and rumors were spreading in the capital that he had abandoned his former love, a sign of moral failing, those with ulterior motives probably saw an opportunity to rise. After my engagement to the crown prince was broken, the Jiang family was no longer part of his faction. My father had many students and subordinates. The Prince of Sheng had no official wife. I had not had much contact with the consort before, but now that she had sent such a formal invitation, she probably wanted to set me up with her son and use me to win over the Jiang family. In an instant, I understood the purpose of this plum blossom viewing banquet. I looked at my mother. "What do father and you think?" my mother insisted. "Cordelia, you've been cooped up for so long. It is a good time to get out and get some fresh air." I understood. My father was not interested in the Prince of Sheng. It made sense. Even if the crown prince couldn't control his brothers, the emperor was still there. In the emperor's eyes, only the crown prince was his son. The others were subjects. The consort was so eager to stand out, and the emperor's attitude was unclear. If the Jiang family got involved with the consort's faction, and the emperor later decided to suppress them, the Jiang family would be implicated. The Jiang family did not support any of the princes now. The Jiang family could not refuse the consort's invitation, but whether they responded to her overtures after arriving was another matter. I was just going to get some fresh air. I didn't need to respond to anyone's overtures. I changed into a begonia red dress, applied exquisite makeup, and went to the suburbs with Beatrice. A quiet stream wound through the forest. In the middle of winter, the river was frozen, and 10 miles of plum blossoms bloomed on both banks, a sea of red clouds and fragrant mist. A beautiful sight. It was indeed a good place to relax. As the legitimate daughter of the Zhang family, my status was high. I didn't need to arrive too early, but I couldn't be too late either. I timed it so that I would arrive just before the consort. I strolled slowly along the riverbank, chatting and laughing with Beatrice. As I rounded a red plum tree, I came face to face with Serafina. She was on her tiptoes, reaching for a plum blossom on a high branch. When she saw me, she slipped and fell to the ground, tears immediately welling in her eyes. She looked up at me with teary eyes. Miss Zhang, long time no see." I looked at her and was about to help her up. She instinctively recoiled, as if I were some kind of monster. She even twisted her ankle, and then, realizing her overreaction, looked at me apologetically. I silently withdrew my hand. I didn't understand why she was so hostile towards me. She had interfered with my marriage to the crown prince. With the Zhang family's power, it would have been easy to deal with her. But in my eyes, this was the crown prince's problem, not hers. So I had never made things difficult for her. But now she was afraid of me. I tucked my hands back into my sleeves, warming them with a hand warmer, and looked down at her. "Miss Ku, it has indeed been a long time." I hadn't seen her since our last encounter on the street. "Serafina, why are you sitting in the snow?" The crown prince pulled her up. Seeing her tearful expression, he looked at her with pity and took off his own cloak to cover her. Seeing me, he didn't wait for me to greet him. He pressed his thin lips together and said with displeasure, "Miss Zhang, if you have any complaints, direct them at me. Don't make things difficult for her." I was speechless and explained briefly. "I just happened to run into Miss Ku. She slipped and fell on her own. It has nothing to do with me." The crown prince paused and turned to look at Serafina. "Serafina, is that so?" Serafina had started crying again at some point, sobbing uncontrollably, and couldn't speak for a long time. It looked as if I had bullied her so much that she couldn't even speak. The crown prince's face darkened, but he quickly composed himself and said in a gentle voice, "Miss Zhang, I didn't expect you to be this kind of person. Serafina is timid and kind-hearted. She never quarrels with anyone. Apologize to her, and I will not pursue this matter further." Serafina, a small figure huddled in the cloak, also looked at me timidly. A cold wind blew in my face. I looked up and studied her again, just as I had when I first saw her. Her eyes were clear then. After a short time in the capital, had she already learned these low-class tricks? I had no intention of fighting with her, but I would not let anyone get under my skin, so I apologized. "I'm sorry, it was my fault. If I had known Miss Q was so timid, I would not have strolled along the riverbank and accidentally run into her. From now on, wherever Miss Q is, I will be sure to stay 3 miles away and not appear in her sight." My sarcastic words successfully stunned the two of them. Perhaps my image as a noble lady was so ingrained in their minds that they never expected me to be so sharp-tongued. Actually, I hadn't expected it either. I had noticed that I had been becoming more and more reckless lately, But that was fine. I smiled faintly. As an apology, I'll have someone pick that plum blossom for you, I said to Serafina. I told Beatrice to get the red plum blossom from the branch. She contorted her body for a long time, and finally managed to break it off. Then, with a cry of "Aya," she slipped and fell on the snow. I saw her secretly pinch her own thigh, and tears immediately streamed down her face. She complained to me pitifully. "Miss, someone scared me and made me fall. You have to stand up for me." Then she glanced at Serafina, her gaze trying to be subtle but failing. I scolded Beatrice. "You're just too timid. Who can you blame? You're like a rabbit. Get up. Do you think His Highness the Crown Prince is blind?" The Crown Prince's face was dark. Beatrice got up, muttering, "I wouldn't dare compare myself to a rabbit. The rabbit you used to have, miss. When it got jealous and angry, a single stomp of its foot would make the whole Jiang residence tremble." I was amused, and the frustration of being wrongly accused vanished. I took the plum blossom, and with graceful steps, walked over to Serafina and tucked it into the fur of her cloak. I looked at the Crown Prince. "I've apologized and made amends. Is your Highness satisfied?" The Crown Prince naturally understood the sarcasm in my little play. He looked at me with some disbelief. Just then, someone walked over, clapping their hands. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Two young ladies falling in the same spot. This plum tree must be unlucky. A man in fine clothes who bore some resemblance to the Crown Prince? It was the Prince of Shang. His words confirmed that Serafina had fallen on her own, and that I had nothing to do with it. Serafina's face turned a little pale. The Crown Prince looked at her in disbelief, but he didn't say anything on the spot. He apologized to me. "I'm sorry. I misunderstood you, Miss Jiang." I smiled. "It is fine. Whether your Highness believes me or not has nothing to do with me." He was slightly taken aback. The Prince of Shang interjected. "Brother, I came to get you and just happened to see this. Since the matter is clear, let's go. The banquet is about to start." After saying this, he also greeted me. "Miss Jiang, it is rare to see you in red today. You are more beautiful than the 10 miles of plum blossoms." I smiled politely but did not reply. Praising his former fiancée in front of the Crown Prince upon meeting. How foolish. Before leaving, I looked back at Serafina one last time. "This cloak you're wearing, Miss Ku, if I remember correctly, was a birthday gift I gave to His Highness one year. There's a piece of ginger embroidered in the corner." My things were usually marked with an embroidered ginger flower. That cloak, Alaric had made me angry, so I had temporarily changed the ginger flower to an ugly piece of ginger. The people in the Eastern Palace didn't know about this, so they had overlooked it when they were sorting through things last time. I only remembered it today when I saw the cloak. Serafina was suddenly embarrassed, not knowing whether to keep wearing the cloak or take it off and give it back to me. The Crown Prince probably hadn't expected that this cloak was also from me. After a moment's thought, he said to me, 100,000 silver. How about I buy this cloak from you, Miss Jiang? I held my hand warmer. My hands warm inside, the cold wind unable to penetrate my sleeves. I don't need this cloak, nor do I need 100,000 silver. I don't want something someone else has worn. Consider it a gift to Miss Q. Serafina froze. The Crown Prince's face paled slightly, but he still replied good-naturedly. Then thank you, Miss Jiang. I didn't look at them again. 10 miles of plum blossoms, their vibrant red covering the new snow, where the winter plums bloomed most profusely. The palace servants had set up a stage, and actors were performing on it. By the time I arrived, there were already many people. Seeing me walk in with the Crown Prince and the Prince of Shang, they all looked at us with curiosity. I ignored their gazes and greeted the noble ladies I knew. Soon, I was engaged in their conversation, my words and laughter flowing freely. Eleanor, the legitimate daughter of the general's family, was second only to me in terms of family background and appearance, and was also a highly sought-after bride in the capital. During a pause in our conversation, she asked me, "The imperial consort has specially brought a precious cinnabar beauty plum tree. I'm afraid she will ask someone to display their talents later, with the tree as the prize. Does Miss Jiang like the cinnabar beauty plum?" If I were to win the Plum Blossom viewing banquet, my reputation would surely soar, and I would be even more in line with the consort's criteria for a daughter-in-law. She was asking if I was interested in the position of the Prince of Shang's official wife, I replied slowly. The beauty plum is a rare and precious flower. Who wouldn't like it? But my family also has many treasures. This plum tree should be left for someone who likes it more. The meaning was clear. I was not interested, Eleanor said. That is my thought as well. We looked at each other and smiled. Soon after, the consort arrived and called me to the front, speaking to me in a kind and friendly manner. It has been a long time. Cordelia has grown even more beautiful. I smiled sweetly. Not as beautiful as your ladyship. She placed her hand on her wrist as if she were about to take off a bracelet and give it to me. A gentle breeze blew past, and I naturally raised my hand to adjust my hair, revealing the jade bracelet on my wrist. It had been bestowed upon the Jiang family by the previous emperor, and was priceless and unique. The consort silently lowered her hand. I finished adjusting my hair, nonchalantly lowered my hand, and continued to hold my hand warmer. It was a good thing I had specially chosen such a precious bracelet before leaving the house. Not only that, but the hairpins and thumb ring I wore were all imperial gifts. They were very precious, but also understated, so as not to outshine the consort. The consort wanted to give me something to get on my good side, but she couldn't find an opportunity. She seemed a little speechless and spoke much less. I was happy to be left alone. When the banquet began, I returned to my original seat. Eleanor sat next to me. The stage was filled with singing and dancing, and below, we silently vied for the pastries. Our tastes were very similar. The consort did indeed propose a talent competition among the young ladies, with the plum tree as the prize. She even had Eleanor start. Eleanor played a zither piece she was best at and received praise from everyone. But I could tell she was holding back. It wasn't just her. Several of the other young ladies who performed also held back. They were the ones who were not interested in the position of the Prince of Shang's wife but didn't want to openly defy the consort. Of course, there were also those who tried their best to impress the consort, playing various instruments, singing, and dancing, one after another, a dazzling display. As I watched the beautiful ladies perform, I pushed the pastries I didn't like towards Eleanor, and put the ones she didn't like back on her plate. Just as Eleanor and I were secretly competing, Serafina took the stage. What was she doing up there? I was surprised and instinctively glanced towards the men's side. The crown prince was not there. I looked at Beatrice. Beatrice had been keeping an eye on everyone's movements. She leaned over and explained that the crown prince had just left with a minister. Oh, I wasn't surprised. Without the support of the Jiang family, and with his memory gone, the crown prince had been quite busy lately. He had to handle many things himself. He had even left for a while on our way here, hadn't he? Someone like Serafina needed to be watched at all times. A moment's carelessness. And look, she was acting recklessly again. This was a plum blossom viewing banquet for the consort to choose a daughter-in-law. What was a woman brought from the Eastern Palace doing here? Eleanor also saw her and raised an eyebrow. Giving me a questioning look, I said. She probably thinks everyone has to perform. It was no big deal, really. She could just perform something simple, nothing too fancy. Just as the thought crossed my mind, Serafina picked up a bamboo leaf and said apologetically that she didn't have any real talents, so she would just play a tune on the leaf. Serafina held the bamboo leaf and played a light and clear folk song, like a spring breeze blowing through the 10 miles of plum blossoms. Soon the snow would melt, the birds would sing, and the green grass would welcome the new season. When the song ended, the audience applauded thunderously. I saw the Prince of Shang staring at Serafina, a look of interest in his eyes. The consort's smile was a bit forced. After this performance, Serafina had stolen the show from Eleanor. If no one could outshine her, she would be the winner of the Plum Blossom viewing banquet. and the consort's precious plum tree would have been prepared in vain. So she looked at me. I hear Miss Jiang has studied with a great master and is highly skilled in the zither. I wonder if you have brought your zither today. Of course, I hadn't brought my zither. Otherwise, what excuse would I have to refuse to perform? I had originally thought, better you than me, and had planned for Eleanor to win the plum tree and deal with the consort, so I hadn't even brought my zither. But the situation was unexpected. If I didn't agree to help the consort, she would surely be displeased with the Jiang family. Besides, it would be a joke if all the noble ladies of the capital were outshone by a young healer. I stood up, replying to the imperial consort, my zither has been sent for tuning and maintenance. However, I see that the opera troupe has a congo, which I can try. Eleanor had played the zither. I couldn't play the zither as well. If I played well, she would lose face. If I played poorly, I would lose face. None of the other noble ladies who had performed had played the congo. The congo was brought up, and I gently plucked the strings to test it. It must have been for a character in the opera who was skilled in the congo, so the troupe had specially brought a real one. The sound quality wasn't great, but it would do. The children of noble families revered the zither and the shao. They considered them elegant, and rarely learned the congo, thinking that instruments like the congo and the pipa were for musicians and performers, and would lower their status. I actually preferred the congo. That time Alaric had made me angry, and he had found the ugly piece of ginger embroidered on the cloak. He knew I was angry and had taken me shopping. I had seen a congo that I liked. That congo was so beautiful that I had even learned to play it for a while, but I had sold it a few months ago. I tested the tuning, and as I got the feel of it, I began to play. The surrounding noise gradually died down, and the audience was drawn into the tranquil world of the music, a world of moonlight and shimmering silk. The moon shone on the empty mountains. A faint fragrance wafted through the air, but the plum blossoms were unseen. When the piece ended, the hall was silent. I was not surprised. I gracefully excused myself from the consort and returned to my seat. Then the audience awoke from their trance and burst into applause. The consort declared me the undisputed winner and awarded me the plum tree. But she didn't have it brought over. With her beautifully painted nails, she plucked the precious plum blossom and handed it to me. Pluck the flower when it is in bloom. My gaze swept over the consort, and I saw the anticipation in her eyes. She was probably waiting for me to give the flower to the Prince of Shang. The Prince of Shang looked at me, his eyes burning with a sense of entitlement. Serafina stared at the flower in my hand, her expression full of envy. Beatrice also stared at the flower, a look of great regret on her face. She was probably thinking that if it hadn't been plucked, the whole pot of plum blossoms would have been worth a lot of money. Eleanor ate the last piece of the pastry we had been fighting over. When she saw me look at her, she even gave me a flirtatious wink. The entire audience was waiting for my next move. The crown prince had returned at some point and was sitting in a corner. His dark hair was still dotted with snowflakes. He stared at the congo in a daze and began to rub his forehead again, as if his head were aching. He looked up and our eyes met. I looked away and smiled sweetly. A famous flower should be paired with a beautiful woman. In my eyes, the most beautiful woman in the world is, of course, my mother. It is a pity she is not here. In that case, I, her daughter, who has inherited 3/10 of her beauty, will shamelessly give this flower to myself. I took the flower and tucked it into my hair. I looked around. Everyone was looking at me with admiration. Only the crown prince, his slender, jade-like hand covering his forehead, had a look of confusion, disorientation, and bewilderment in his eyes. He didn't even notice when Serafina called out to him. I lowered my eyes, my heart unperturbed. After that day, my fame spread even further, and matchmakers began to visit my home one after another. My mother had portraits painted of all the eligible young men in the capital that she approved of, and brought a pile of scrolls to me. Cordelia, your coming-of-age ceremony is in the spring. We need to start preparing for your marriage. These are the ones your father and I have chosen. Take a look and see if any of them catch your eye. I had no interest in the portraits. What was the difference between them? Marrying any one of them would mean leaving my own home and becoming the mistress of another family's mansion, managing accounts and concubines, and living out the rest of my life like that. I threw myself into my mother's arms. Something I hadn't done in a long time. My voice was muffled. Mother, I wish I could stay with you forever. My mother thought I was talking nonsense. Seeing my resistance, she didn't force me and had the portraits put away. We can choose after your coming-of-age ceremony. I was the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family, and many people were watching my marriage prospects. Even the emperor and the consort had inquired several times. It was not something I could just refuse. Not long after my mother left, a servant reported that someone was looking for me. It was Leo. It had been a long time. The sturdy, burly man had lost a lot of weight. When he saw me, his first words were, "Miss Zhang, I came here on my own. Please don't let the crown prince know." Then he handed a box to Beatrice. After the crown prince returned from the Plum Blossom viewing banquet, he gave me this cloak and told me to dispose of it. I remember that you made it, so I brought it to you. Beatrice rolled her eyes. I said, "It is cold. The charcoal is almost gone." Beatrice understood and threw the cloak into the brazier, which was still full of charcoal. The fire immediately flared up. By the time Leo reacted, the cloak was already engulfed in flames. Beatrice warmly invited him to warm himself by the fire, which was worth 100,000 silver. Leo quickly waved his hands in refusal, nearly biting his tongue. "Miss Zhang, you, sigh, it is already burned." He squinted at me and said cautiously, "Miss Zhang, the crown prince has not been well lately. His headaches are getting worse. The other night, he even summoned us all and asked if he had ever given you a Congo. None of us told him that. He remembered it himself, in fragments. He told us not to tell anyone." Leo looked at me with pleading eyes. "Miss Zhang, the old physician is on his way. If His Highness remembers, can you please give him another chance?" I half lifted my eyelids. "Of course." Beatrice's eyes widened. Then I walked over to the brazier. As long as this pile of ashes can be restored to its original form, the crown prince and I can naturally go back to the way we were. Leo had nothing more to say and left, dejected. The seasons changed, the snow melted, and spring returned to the capital. The invitations for my coming-of-age ceremony had been sent to all the noble households. My grandfather said with regret that the old physician, the master of the head of the Imperial Medical Academy, who had also watched me grow up, might not be able to make it back in time. According to his itinerary, he should have been able to make it back before my ceremony. Unfortunately, the old physician had bad luck and ran into bandits on the road. By the time the news reached the capital, he had been missing for several days. The emperor sent the crown prince to suppress the bandits and find him. My grandfather and the old physician were close friends, so he also urged my cousins to go and look for him. None of this affected my coming-of-age ceremony from proceeding as planned. That day, the Jiang residence was filled with guests. The noble ladies surrounded me, helping me with my hair and makeup. Eleanor applied rouge to my cheeks and looked at me with satisfaction. "Cordelia Jiang, today I will grudgingly admit that you are the most beautiful woman in the capital." I looked at the person in the mirror, her eyes bright and charming, beautiful but not seductive. I had to tease her. Tomorrow, the day after, and every day after that, I will be. Then we started bickering again. As I stepped out, I ran into an unexpected person. Eleanor said, "What is she doing here? Did you send an invitation to the Eastern Palace?" I was also puzzled. "No," I asked Beatrice to find out. She came back and said that the heir of the Prince of Anne had brought her into the Zhang residence. I hadn't paid much attention to Serafina for a long time and was a little surprised. How did she get involved with the heir of the Prince of Anne? Eleanor was not surprised at all. "What have you been doing cooped up in your mansion all day? You're so out of the loop. She is not just involved with the heir of the Prince of N. She is also involved with the Prince of Sheng. The Crown Prince seems to be growing distant from her, and he is busy, so he hasn't paid her any mind. I didn't care who she was involved with. I lifted my skirt and continued on my way. When Serafina saw me, she greeted me with an unpracticed curtsy. It seems she had learned a few things during her time in the capital. Eleanor looked her up and down, her expression changing. She asked coldly, "Where did you get that dress?" Serafina was wearing a long, light purple dress with gold embroidery. The luxurious and exquisite dress was very eye-catching, even more so than the one I, the star of the coming-of-age ceremony, was wearing. She was frightened by Eleanor's cold question and stammered, "It was a gift from a dress shop outside the palace," Eleanor asked. "Did the Crown Prince tell you to wear it?" Serafina was at a loss and confessed, "The Crown Prince has been out of the palace lately. He doesn't know." When the dress shop sent the dress, I thought it was for me. Eleanor's reaction was so strong that I was a little puzzled. Was I so out of the loop that I couldn't understand what was so noteworthy about a dress? So I asked. Eleanor sneered. "This dress was custom made by the Crown Prince before he lost his memory. He even asked me what kind of dress Cordelia liked, and told me not to tell you. He wanted to surprise you at your coming-of-age ceremony." I froze, surprised. Yes, but not pleasantly. Serafina was also shocked, her face flushing. "I'm sorry, I didn't know this dress was made especially for you." Before I could say anything, the butler hurried past. Seeing me, he informed me that the Crown Prince had been thrown from his horse while suppressing the bandits, had hit his head on a rock, and was now unconscious. After saying this, he hurried to inform my father inside. My father hurried out. Neither Serafina nor the Crown Prince could affect the normal proceedings of my coming-of-age ceremony. While the Crown Prince was seriously injured and being treated by a group of doctors, I was in a sea of flowers, surrounded by a group of kind and amiable elders. After 3 bows and 3 prostrations, I was given a beautiful name by the elders: Aurora. Aurora, which corresponds to the moon. The sun, moon, and stars shine upon me. The darkness of the world cannot touch me. The ceremony was over. As my mother and I were seeing off the guests, and most of them had already left, a white horse came galloping towards the Jiang residence, and came to a screeching halt at the gate. The horse whinnied, its hooves pawing the ground. The Crown Prince dismounted. A white bandage was wrapped around his forehead, seemingly in a hurry and not very securely. It was already coming loose, and blood had soaked through, dotting his forehead and his clothes. His handsome face, adorned with drops of crimson blood, had a certain broken beauty. He stumbled a few times and walked quickly towards me. When he reached me, he seemed to hesitate, carefully pinching a corner of my sleeve as if he were afraid I would suddenly disappear. His deep eyes stared at me without blinking. His magnetic low voice was filled with hope. "Cordelia, today is your coming-of-age ceremony. Am I not too late?" I pulled my sleeve back, my gaze calm. "Your Highness, the coming-of-age ceremony is over. The guests are almost all gone. You are late." The Crown Prince's already pale face grew even paler. He looked down at his empty fingertips and said in a trembling voice, "When my head hit the rock, I suddenly remembered many old things. I remember everything. I'm sorry, Cordelia. I should have come sooner." I smiled faintly. "Your Highness, there is no need." "Even if you had come sooner, you might not have been able to." From the beginning, I did not send an invitation to the Eastern Palace. He stood there, stunned, for a long time as if he didn't understand what I was saying. His misty, peach blossom eyes stared at me. "It doesn't matter, Cordelia. From the time you were 1 year old, I have been with you on every birthday. From now on until you are 100 years old, I will always be with you. Of all the birthdays we will have, this one that I missed, I will make it up to you." Eleanor, who was watching from the side, said with schadenfreude, "Your Highness must be delirious from your injuries." Today is Cordelia's coming-of-age ceremony. It only happens once in a lifetime. How can it be the same as any other birthday? Once you miss it, you've missed it. You can't make it up. I was getting impatient standing in the cold wind with him. There is no need. My coming-of-age ceremony was wonderful. I don't need it to be made up. I have other matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving now. He was flustered and wanted to stop me, but he hesitated for a moment. In that moment, Eleanor stepped in front of me and raised an eyebrow, gesturing for him to look to the side. Your Highness, that is your person from the Eastern Palace. The Crown Prince followed her gaze and saw Serafina, who had not yet left. In the corner his expression didn't change. But when he saw the dress she was wearing, his face suddenly turned cold. This is the dress I had specially made for Cordelia's coming-of-age ceremony. Why are you wearing it? The Crown Prince's eyes were cold, and he exuded the aura of a Crown Prince. Serafina looked at him helplessly, her pitiful appearance making one feel sorry for her. She repeated the explanation she had given to me and Eleanor, and then said in a small voice, I didn't mean to. I'll go and change out of this dress right now and give it back to Miss Jiang. The Crown Prince said, There is no need. How can you give Cordelia a dress that you have worn? Also, you should refer to yourself as a commoner when speaking to me. Serafina looked at him in surprise. The man opposite her did not show any signs of softening as he usually did. His eyelids were half closed. The corners of his eyes curved into a distant coldness. She panicked. Your Highness, have you regained your memory? The Crown Prince did not confirm or deny. He said, I will have someone give you a sum of silver. You can take it and go back to your hometown. If you don't want to go back, you can also marry a minor official outside the capital. The steward of the Eastern Palace will prepare a dowry for you. The Eastern Palace does not keep outsiders. Serafina's tears fell again. Your Highness, I saved you from the bank of the Yun River. You said you would not treat me unfairly. If I had not been dressed so richly at the time, would you have saved me? Serafina was stunned. The answer was obvious. The Crown Prince just looked at her, his voice cold. Given your status, marrying a court official is not a bad deal. You think that when I had amnesia, and your father said it was still possible to treat me, it was you who stopped him. All of this. You think I don't know? At that time, I didn't remember the past, so I thought that even if you stopped your father, it wouldn't matter. Now that I think about it, whether you saved me or not, it was all for wealth and glory. Marrying a minor official is the best you can hope for. Serafina walked away, dejected. Eleanor was holding me back, not letting me leave, enjoying the show. Now I could finally go. Right? I gave her a look, telling her to let go of her dog paws, but the Crown Prince walked over. Cordelia, is this arrangement to your liking? It was fine. Although Serafina was annoying, she hadn't committed any major crimes. The fact that she had saved his life was undeniable. I would have done something similar. But what did any of this have to do with me? I said with polite distance. Your Highness is dealing with a matter concerning your own palace. There is no need to ask for my opinion. After all, you and I have already broken off our engagement. He swayed, unsteady on his feet, and quickly explained. I have not touched her. She has been living in the side courtyard. Leo and the others can all vouch for me. Our childhood friendship was no joke. I knew him too well. His explanation was not surprising. The Crown Prince was a thorough and meticulous person. While he had amnesia, before he could secure a title for Serafina, he would not have touched her. That wasn't the point. I sighed and emphasized again. Your Highness, we have already broken off our engagement. You knelt in front of the Golden Throne Hall in the rain for days to get it. From now on, we are free to marry whomever we please, and it has nothing to do with each other. He was still unwilling to give up. Cordelia, if I can persuade our elders on my own, would you be willing to renew our engagement? I looked at him and refused directly. No. I turned and walked away. I heard that the Crown Prince had fainted from grief and his old injuries had reopened. I didn't care. I just asked the family doctor to keep an eye on him and make sure nothing happened to him outside the Zhang residence. The crown prince was carried back to the eastern palace. The next day, he dragged his weak body back to the Zhang residence. My gatekeeper was bold enough to refuse entry to the crown prince. The crown prince was not angry, nor was he discouraged. He came every day, rain or shine. If it weren't for the fact that his injuries never healed due to his constant exertions, and the dark circles under his eyes, one would think he had nothing better to do than come to the Jiang residence. But he was actually very busy. In the midst of his official duties, he also found time to send one treasure after another to the Jiang residence, things I had thrown into the Yun River, or had Beatrice pawn, or similar items, one a day. But the things never reached me. They were all disposed of by the servants. I didn't want to deal with these troublesome matters. Spring had brought new greenery, and it was the perfect time for an outing. On the Shangxi festival, I went out with Eleanor to fly kites. Unfortunately, the weather was not good. Soon, dark clouds gathered, and a light rain began to fall. Eleanor and I took shelter under a covered bridge, watching the misty rain and the green mountains hidden in the slanting wind. In the distance, on a mountain peak, there was a temple, a single point of yellow in a sea of green. Then I saw the crown prince stumbling towards me. Eleanor said, "Well, if it isn't His Highness, the crown prince. A rare sight indeed, and in such a sorry state." He was walking in a hurry, without an umbrella. The wound on his forehead, which should have healed long ago, was bleeding again. When he reached me, he stopped, not wanting to get me wet. He held out something he had been clutching in his hand. In his slender, jade-like hand lay a good luck charm, not a drop of water on it, even though he was soaked to the bone. His peach blossom eyes reflected the endless green mountains, and in the center of the mountains was me. He said, "Cordelia, this is for today." Every day, he found one of the old things I had thrown away. This was a good luck charm from the temple in the distance. You had to climb the stone steps one by one to get it. The crown prince was already seriously injured, so it was no wonder his wound had reopened after all this exertion. He didn't care about the pain of his wound, only at me, waiting for my response. I didn't take the good luck charm. I just stood there and sighed softly. "Your Highness, why do you do this? There are countless other women in the world. You are the heir to the throne, the future emperor. What kind of woman can't you have?" The crown prince lowered his eyes. "But none of them are you. None of them are my Cordelia," I heard him murmur, his voice fading into the gentle breeze. In the end, I did not take the good luck charm. I opened my umbrella and left early. I left him standing there alone, staring at my back in a daze. It was still raining, and I didn't know where to go. I walked aimlessly. Suddenly, a disheveled old man ran out in front of me and started digging up a plant. After digging it out, he threw his head back and laughed. "I'm so lucky. I can even find such a precious herb on the road." As he laughed, he finally noticed me and Beatrice standing beside him. His laughter stopped abruptly. "On the Shangxi festival outing, I didn't get to fly a kite, but I did pick up an old man. It was the long-lost old physician surnamed Lin. After he had cleaned himself up, he tearfully complained to my grandfather about the bandits. Afterward, the two of them went to the palace together, and he tearfully complained to the emperor, saying that the bandits were well prepared and were definitely not ordinary bandits, but professional assassins in disguise. The emperor said he understood and quickly sent the crying old man away. He had been summoned back to the capital to treat the crown prince's amnesia, but now that was no longer necessary. But since he was here, he couldn't have made the trip for nothing. He went to visit all his old friends in their residences. The head of the Imperial Medical Academy came to see his master and wanted to take him to his home to live. But the old physician refused. He had not seen his old friends for many years and preferred to stay at the Prime Minister's residence. He stayed until summer. The emperor's birthday was approaching, and the old physician planned to leave after attending the birthday banquet. The Zhang family sent several carriages to the palace. I was delayed and was the last to leave. On the way, my carriage broke down. Just as I was at a loss, a carriage pulled up beside me. The Prince of Sheng got out and stared at me with fascination. "Miss Zhang, do you need a ride?" I was hesitating when the Crown Prince also arrived. He must have heard that my carriage had broken down and had come from the palace to pick me up. He glanced at the Prince of Sheng without stopping and looked at me. "Cordelia, your carriage is broken. I've come to take you." One was the Prince of Sheng, the other was the Crown Prince. Both were looking at me, waiting for me to make a choice. I didn't want to choose either of them. I thanked them politely. "Thank you, Your Highness and Your Royal Highness, but I can get to the palace on my own." I got out of the carriage, unhitched a horse, and mounted it. I gestured for the driver to wait for someone from the Zhang residence, and ignoring the reactions of the Crown Prince and the Prince of Sheng, rode away. As a noble lady, I naturally knew some archery and riding. I was a bit rusty, but I made it to the palace without incident. The palace was bustling with people. I found a corner to adjust my dress, and then, with graceful steps, I was once again the dignified and noble daughter of the Jiang family. Eleanor asked me where I had been. I explained briefly, and then took my seat. After listening, Eleanor looked at the emperor and his concubines on the high platform and whispered to me, "It seems the Prince of Sheng has been gaining power lately. He even dares to compete with the Crown Prince." On the high platform, the imperial consort was adorned with jewels, her face flushed and radiant. She looked to be in high spirits. The empress, on the other hand, looked a little weary. During the period of the Crown Prince's amnesia, his handling of state affairs had inevitably become lax. Coupled with the loss of the Zhang family's support, the Prince of Sheng's faction had indeed become much more assertive. The birthday banquet lasted until the evening. The emperor was showing signs of fatigue and was about to leave when the Prince of Sheng stood up and said that he wanted to add to the festive atmosphere and requested a marriage from his father. The emperor was intrigued. Which young lady? I suddenly had a bad feeling. Sure enough, the Prince of Sheng looked at me and said loudly, "The eldest daughter of the Zhang family is talented and virtuous. I have admired her for a long time and hope that father will grant my wish." I hate this, when they don't even ask for my opinion, and just go to the emperor to request a marriage. It is as if I'm some rare object without my own likes and dislikes, just to be arranged by others. I lowered my head and swirled the fruit wine in my cup, but my heart was in my throat. The emperor did not immediately give an answer, and the scene became a little awkward. My father stood up and tried to smooth things over with a joke, attempting to politely refuse and ease the tension. "My daughter just had her coming-of-age ceremony this spring. I was hoping to keep her with me for a few more years." The consort giggled. "She is of age. We can arrange the engagement first and have the wedding in a few years." The Prince of Sheng said, "I don't mind that Miss Jiang has been jilted before. I will be good to her for the rest of my life." He really had a way with words. My father's face darkened. I suddenly lost my nervousness and felt a little amused. The Prince of Sheng's residence was full of concubines. He didn't mind me, but I minded him. I looked up at the emperor's reaction. He was already half drunk and was still trying to think. On the other side, the empress was drinking by herself, indifferent. The crown prince's jade crown was adorned with gold ornaments, which shimmered in the light of the palace lanterns. His fair and handsome face was also illuminated by the warm light. His layered ceremonial robes were embroidered with auspicious clouds that reflected the light. Amidst all this splendor, his dark eyes were incredibly deep. The emperor said, "This matter." The crown prince coughed lightly, then coughed up a mouthful of blood. On his exquisite, jade-like face, the blood on his thin lips was like a crimson winter plum. His dark, peach blossom eyes stared at me without blinking. The emperor immediately fell silent and nervously called for the imperial physicians. After a chaotic period, the crown prince was taken away. The emperor had forgotten about the marriage and left soon after. The empress followed closely behind. the matter was left unresolved. The Prince of Shang angrily threw his cup on the ground. He turned to look at me, his eyes still filled with the same sense of entitlement. Eleanor stuffed a pastry into my mouth, just enough to block his view. Here, this is your least favorite. I instinctively took a bite, and then my whole mood soured. If you're going to save me, why give me my least favorite food? I pinched her arm, and she winced. When the banquet was over, I returned to the residence with my mother. As we were taking a head count, we realized that one person from the Prime Minister's entourage was missing. After counting again and again, Beatrice slapped her thigh. I remember now. The old physician came with us. Before leaving, the old physician had said goodbye to my grandfather and had brought his precious little medicine box, saying that after eating the rare wild ginseng and sea urchin from the Emperor's imperial kitchen, he would leave and have the Prime Minister's men escort him out of the city. This unfortunate fellow didn't get to leave. He was dragged to the Eastern Palace for an emergency. My father thought for a moment and didn't send my brother to find him. He called me over and told me to leave a carriage at the palace gate and to bring the old physician back. On the one hand, it was not appropriate for a man to enter and exit the inner palace. On the other hand, the crown prince's spitting blood today might have had something to do with me, so I should go and see him. I received the instructions and went to the Eastern Palace. It had been almost a year since I had set foot in this place. It was somewhat familiar, yet somewhat strange. The lotus flowers in the lake were in full bloom, and it was another summer of brocade-like flowers. By the time I arrived, the physicians had mostly left. Leo was very happy to see me and enthusiastically let me in, almost pushing me forward. I walked forward at a leisurely pace. There was a screen at the corner ahead. Just as I was about to go around it, I heard the old physician's angry voice. "You never had amnesia." I froze. The two people on the other side of the screen did not notice my arrival. Through the gap, I could see the old physician's little beard trembling with anger. The old man's eyes were rolling up to the heavens. To trick this old official into traveling all this way for nothing. The crown prince's long eyelashes shielded his eyes, making his expression unreadable. He said slowly, "Amnesia. If I say I have it, then I have it." He leisurely drew the sword at his side and held it to the physician's neck. His eyelids half closed. "Now, do I have amnesia?" The old physician was a little intimidated, but he still said stubbornly, "Yes, fine. I'm an old man, kill me if you want. Your broken body is probably not going to last as long as mine." Intimidated, but not completely. He was still being very rude. The crown prince didn't seem to mind. He just sheathed his sword and said nonchalantly, "Then I will have to trouble you, Physician Lin, to mend this broken body of mine." Meaning the old physician wasn't going anywhere. The old man resignedly flicked his sleeve, packed his medicine box, and was about to leave. He paused. "Your Highness, I can keep your secret. A fake amnesia and a failing body. Others won't be able to tell. But paper can't wrap fire forever. If the Emperor finds out one day, this old official..." The crown prince raised an eyebrow. What didn't Physician Lin only diagnose a relapse of an old injury? The old physician fell silent. He understood his meaning. If the Emperor found out one day, it would have nothing to do with him. The old man with white hair and a white beard took a deep look at the crown prince, then picked up his medicine box and left from the other side. I stood behind the screen, not knowing whether to advance or retreat. As I hesitated, the crown prince came over with his sword. A martial artist could probably easily detect the extra presence in the hall. What little mouse is eavesdropping? His leisurely stroll was silhouetted on the screen, a tall and slender figure. He rounded the screen and our eyes met. He stopped abruptly. His dark eyes were deep. His slightly curved thin lips held a hint of sinister perversity. He lifted my chin with his long sword, the sharp blade glinting coldly. "So, it is Cordelia Jiang." I looked at him. His features were the same as before, but he felt like a stranger. It reminded me of that day of dark clouds and rain. He was kneeling outside the Golden Throne Hall. his back straight. I held the umbrella over his head. The man beside me did not look up. His handsome features were the same, but there was a faint sense of unfamiliarity about him. Suddenly, a bold guess crossed my mind. "You are not Alaric," I concluded. I looked straight into his eyes, not missing a single flicker of emotion. His face was pale, his dark hair falling across his forehead. His peach blossom eyes were like a deep pool, bottomless. He had a broken, frail, and utterly harmless air about him. A light and airy sentence came out of his mouth, but it sounded like thunder in my ears. "I am indeed not Alaric. Alaric is long dead." I forgot the sharp sword at my throat, and instinctively took a step forward. "What did you say?" The sharp blade grazed my cheek. He quickly moved it away, a flicker of anger in his eyes. In his panic, he let the sword fall to the ground with a clatter, which startled me. I slowed my steps and stared at him. He began to laugh, and as he laughed, he coughed and coughed up more blood. He carelessly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The crimson blood stained his pale, thin lips, adding a touch of decadent beauty to his brokenness. He lowered his eyes. On each sheet was written the character, Alaric. "It was I who found and returned your old things every day. Today I imitated your childhood handwriting and wrote many Alarics, just like the stack you threw off the cliff. I was going to have someone send them to the Prime Minister's residence later, but since you've already discovered that I'm not Alaric," he casually tossed the papers in his hand, and they rushed towards me, imbued with his inner strength. Even though they were light and soft, they had the force of a sword. Plucking a leaf, throwing a flower, all can be destructive. A few sheets flew past me and slammed the hall door behind me shut. The rest scattered, filling the hall like fallen pear blossoms. Not a single one touched my dress. He stepped on the scattered white papers and walked towards me, his dark eyes unfathomable. I didn't know what he was planning. I picked up the sword from the ground and pointed it at him. At least it gave me a sense of security. If he were a normal person, with a bit of sense, he would know not to touch me. I had the century-old Jing family behind me, so when I heard the secret just now and he held the sword to my chin, I wasn't too scared. But now, with the sword in my hand, I felt a strange sense of fear. He didn't look like a normal person. He looked like a madman who had been suppressed for a long time. I frowned at him. "Who are you?" He was not afraid of the sword in my hand. He even reached out and grasped the blade. A line of blood trickled down the sword. He seemed like a monster, unable to feel pain, just smiling faintly. "A young lady shouldn't play with swords. They have no eyes and are too dangerous." With what seemed like a light flick of his wrist, he easily snatched the sword from me and threw it far away. I stumbled back in a panic and fell onto the couch. Seeing him approach, I instinctively kicked him twice. He was, at this moment, much more fragile than I had imagined. He coughed a few times and fell to the ground. He then leaned against the couch and sat on the floor. His left hand, which was not bleeding, grabbed my foot. He had been kicked and had even spat up blood, but he wasn't angry at all. Instead, he was trembling with a strange excitement. His deep, peach blossom eyes were dark and unreadable, staring at me intently. His slender, beautiful hands quickly removed my shoes and socks. The cool pads of his fingers touched my skin. It was as if he were overjoyed to be so close to me for the first time, as if he were holding a precious treasure, wanting to touch it but not daring to, yet longing to. Finally, he very lightly caressed the top of my foot. I instinctively curled my toes and was about to kick him again. He looked up and met my eyes, his voice hoarse. "Vaughn." I was puzzled. He touched the sole of my foot with his right hand, and with his own blood, wrote a character, one stroke at a time. The sensation tickled me and made me tremble. He looked at me, as if he wanted to draw me into the deep pool of his peach blossom eyes, and said, solemnly and word by word, Cordelia Jang. Remember this? My name is Vaughn. Then he finally let me go. I quickly got up and moved to the farthest corner from him. When I looked back, the man in the blood-stained white robes, with layers of his robes spread out on the ground, was sitting there quietly watching me. The floor was covered with white paper, each with the character Alarix written on it. On the piece of paper closest to him, where I had stepped, was a character Vaughn written in blood. The Vaughn of illusion. The Vaughn of obsession. Leaving the Eastern Palace, I got the old physician into the carriage. He was carrying his precious medicine box and a small pre-packed bundle. He said with regret that he had some other business and would not be leaving the capital for now. We should go back to the Prime Minister's residence first. The carriage did not leave the capital, nor did it return to the Prime Minister's residence. It drove to a remote, deserted corner. I had the driver and Beatrice stand guard outside. When only the old physician and I were left, I said to him, Senior, I have a question that I would like to ask you. The old physician waited for my question with a puzzled expression, not understanding why it was necessary to dismiss everyone else for this. I said, Vaughn. Who is he? Just now in the Eastern Palace, after he had told me his name, he had let me go, saying that it was not proper for an unmarried man and woman to be in the same room for too long, as it would be bad for my reputation. If I had any questions, I could ask Physician Lin. The old physician's relaxed demeanor stiffened, and his cloudy old eyes shot out a sharp look. Where did you hear that name? My voice was calm. He told me himself. The old physician's eyes became cloudy and relaxed again, and he sneered with an unknown meaning. He couldn't keep up the act for long, could he? Then he sighed. Vaughn is a pitiful person. By rights, he is also the Emperor's legitimate son. When the Empress gave birth that year, I happened to be on duty. She gave birth to a pair of twins. The elder was Alaric, the younger was Vaughn, born only half an hour apart. It was truly a twist of fate. My heart was in turmoil. In the history of the royal family, there were many cases of twins fighting each other for power. Therefore, the royal family had always considered twins an inauspicious sign, and had a tacit understanding that the younger twin would be killed at birth. Many consorts had fallen out of favor for giving birth to twins. The old physician continued. The Empress was afraid of people knowing she had given birth to twins, and begged me not to tell the Emperor. Her maternal clan was powerful, and my wife and children were in the capital at the time, so I agreed. The younger one was supposed to be killed, but the Empress couldn't bear to do it and secretly gave him to me to raise. Because the only ones who knew of the prince's existence were the Empress and myself, and we couldn't have anyone else knowing. Too many people, and the secret would be hard to keep. If Vaughn had been raised by Physician Lin, and after the physician's retirement, they had moved to his hometown together, a place of beautiful scenery, clear skies, and vast fields, with simple and honest people. If that had been the case, Vaughn might have been a refined and gentle person now. But when he was 9 years old, and Physician Lin was leaving the capital with his family, the Empress secretly came and took him away. She couldn't bear to let Vaughn out of her sight, not because she was worried about him, but because she was afraid his identity would be exposed and implicate her. Perhaps right after giving birth, the Empress had seen both children as equally important. Otherwise, she wouldn't have risked keeping the younger son and entrusting him to the physician. But people change. Alaric was raised by her side and was the favored crown prince. The Empress's heart gradually leaned towards the one she had raised. She even began to use her 9-year-old younger son. The Empress sent Vaughn to a secret guard unit of her maternal clan. The only other person who knew of the young prince's existence was the head of the secret guards, but he only knew that he was the crown prince's twin brother and did not know his name. Sending her younger son to a secret guard unit that could not be seen in the light of day, both prevented him from being discovered and allowed him to learn martial arts so that he could be a body double for his older brother and take a knife for him if needed. The Empress visited him once in the secret guard camp. At that time, Vaughn was locked up with a group of children of similar age, his face covered with a mask, fighting a leopard. The other children were so scared that they scattered and fled. Vaughn, wearing a tusked mask, clung to the leopard, gouged out one of its eyes, and then shouted for everyone to kill the beast together. The scene was very bloody. The Empress turned her head and vomited. From then on, she never went to see him again. A cruel and ruthless person is not liked by others. Even a biological mother will be disgusted. Later, Vaughn became a secret guard and followed Crown Prince Alaric. Alaric did not know of his existence, and the other secret guards did not know his appearance or identity. Only the head of the secret guards knew. He was the most outstanding one, and the one who was most reckless with himself. He always focused on the result of a mission, regardless of the means. He used a life-or-death method, and over the years, he had accumulated countless old and new injuries. Under his handsome and perfect exterior, who knew how many internal injuries and hidden poisons he had? The old physician sighed again. I haven't seen His Highness in many years. When I checked his pulse just now, I realized how badly his internal organs have been damaged. He is a mess. It is worrying and infuriating. I've never seen anyone who doesn't cherish themselves like him. I said, You have been living in your hometown all this time. How do you know so much about what happened to him after he was 9? Physician Lin did not. I saved the head of the secret guards from death's door several times. He owes me a debt of gratitude. It is not difficult to have him occasionally send me letters to update me on His Highness's situation. After a moment of silence, I asked the question that concerned me most. Then, how did he, Vaughn, disguise himself as Alaric? My heart was in my throat, waiting for the old physician's answer. But he said, I only just discovered that the Crown Prince was actually His Highness in disguise. After so many years in the Imperial Medical Academy, I have become accustomed to listening less and asking less. I didn't inquire into the details. You will have to ask His Highness himself, Miss Jiang. No wonder the old physician had been so rude. He had taken a deep look at Vaughn before leaving. It turned out he had recognized an old acquaintance. And no wonder the Empress had looked so haggard at the banquet. It wasn't because the consort was in favor, but because she knew of Alaric's death. She hadn't cared when the Crown Prince spat up blood. She had probably already discovered Vaughn's identity. I was the third person to know that he was Vaughn. Returning to the Prime Minister's residence felt like a lifetime had passed. My mind was in a whirl, and I was torn about whether to tell my father. The old physician, however, was quite at ease. After dropping that bombshell, he hummed a little tune and went to say goodbye to my grandfather. He bought a small house in the capital and planned to stay for a while. He even asked me to write a letter for him, saying my handwriting was better, to his wife and children back home. He said he was entangled with a repeatedly injured venomous snake and would be back in a while. He also reminded them to feed his turtle. I was hesitant to write. Such a cryptic message, will they understand? The old physician waved his hand. That is not the point. If they don't understand, they don't understand. The point is to feed my little turtle. If it is well cared for, it can see me off in my old age. He said he would see the prince off first, and then the little turtle would see him off. An excellent arrangement. I paused for a moment, then picked up the brush and wrote as he dictated. On the very day the old physician moved into his new house, my father told me some news. The emperor had arranged a marriage for the Prince of Sheng. After saying this, my father couldn't help but laugh gloatingly before he could explain. He is marrying that daughter of the Zhang family. The Zhang family had a daughter who was having trouble finding a husband. She was fat and ugly, with a fiery temper. She was almost 20 and still hadn't found a husband. She looked down on men from good families, and men from lower-class families looked down on her. My father clapped his hands and laughed. The emperor must have been drunk when he issued the edict. It had been almost 2 days. He should have sobered up by now. I had a feeling Vaughn was behind this. The day the Prince of Sheng got married, the capital was especially lively. The Zhang family was also a prominent family, and the dowry they prepared stretched from one end of the street to the other. a 10-mile red dowry, a sight for the whole city. A maid in my room excitedly suggested we go and see. I went to a tavern along the street. From the window, I could see the wedding procession below. The groom looked dejected, as if he were attending a funeral. Before I could turn back, Vaughn's lazy and pleasant laugh sounded in my ear. See? Aren't they a perfect match? Warm breath brushed against the fine hairs on my ear. I turned and Vaughn, dressed in white with black hair, stood behind me so close that it felt as if he were embracing me through the air. He seemed to realize this too, and a restrained confusion appeared in his dark pupils. I took a few steps back, my face expressionless. You exposed a pawn you had carefully placed in the Zhang residence, just to lure me out and say that? The maid beside me realized her identity had been exposed, and knelt down in shock, begging for mercy. Vaughn sent a gust of wind with his palm and knocked her out. His gaze never left me. A hint of grievance filled his peach blossom eyes. Cordelia, I haven't seen you in 2 days. I was unmoved. I only learned of your existence 2 days ago. We are not so familiar as to need to see each other every day. His face suddenly darkened, but then it softened again. That is right. You only know me now, but I've been by Alaric's side since I was a teenager, taking swords for him. I knew you then, the little girl of the Zhang family, so proper in public, but always whining to your mother and Alaric in private. From the time you were 5 until you were 15, for so many years, I always knew you. At that time I thought, Cordelia Zhang, you are so annoying. Vaughn paused, his meaning unclear, and then continued on his own. I thought I should hate you. So, after I was mistaken for Alaric, I broke off your engagement because the Zhang family was Alaric's direct power base. If my identity were to be exposed one day, I couldn't be sure that the Zhang family wouldn't turn on me. I asked. Did you kill Alaric? He paused, then smiled wryly and complained in a low voice. That is all you care about. I don't like that dark and sunless place. Vaughn looked at me. From the moment I was sent to the secret guard camp, I consciously began to build my own power. Sooner or later, I would have to fight Alaric. Either I would kill him, or he would kill me. It didn't matter. But before I could make a move, he was assassinated. I was also seriously injured, and I drifted downstream and was picked up by someone. The situation was unclear, so I feigned amnesia. I didn't expect that when people came looking for Alaric a month later, they would mistake me for him. Actually, I was also looking for him that month. On the very day they mistook me for him, I found his bones. It is really laughable. I remained impassive, my fingertips trembling slightly. I didn't even notice this small movement, but Vaughn stared at my hand, a look of uncontrollable jealousy and grievance on his face. When he saw me look at him, the turbulent emotions in his eyes instantly disappeared. He began to laugh, a crazed laugh, but his voice was still clear and pleasant. I buried his bones in a small mound on the bank. Then I returned to the capital, as Alaric. I never intended to pretend to be him forever. I wanted to one day be able to tell everyone openly that I am Vaughn. When I returned to the capital, I contacted my men as quickly as possible and sorted through Alaric's subordinates, subduing those who could be subdued and suppressing those who could not. I had to establish a firm foothold as quickly as possible before my identity was revealed. The Zhang family is a behemoth, and they know Alaric best. The quickest way I could think of to break away from them was to use Serafina as an excuse to break off our engagement. I was not surprised. So, she and I were just pawns in your game? Vaughn's smile suddenly vanished. He stared at me with his deep, dark eyes. At that time, I thought I should hate you, so I didn't think too much when I broke off the engagement. But later, when I saw you crying on the cliff, smiling in the carriage, playing the congo so well, and then pinning the red plum blossom in your hair after stunning the audience, I thought, I don't actually hate you. I just hate that the person you were whining to at that time wasn't me. That is all. A cry of surprise erupted from below. It turned out the bride's veil had fallen off, and the crowd was very excited. Vaughn's voice, so soft in the midst of the street's clamor, sounded heavy in my ears. I regretted it. I compromised. I accepted my fate. Even if I had to pretend to be Alaric for the rest of my life, as long as I could be near you, it wouldn't be so bad. So that day, when the horse shied and I hit my head, I took the opportunity to pretend to have regained my memory. Finally, I could look at you openly. He lowered his eyes, looking utterly dejected. I didn't expect you to find out so quickly. I suspected he was deliberately playing the victim. How could a cunning strategist so easily expose his vulnerability? Outside, the bride had put her veil back on, indifferent to the gossip in the street. The groom, however, looked furious. When the groom, the Prince of Shang, looked up, he saw a man in white standing by the window of the tavern next door, a sarcastic smile on his face. The Prince of Shang was so angry he was about to jump off his horse and come upstairs, but he was stopped by the crowd. Then the bride twisted his ear and dragged him away. Vaughn's eyes were contemptuous and cold. His dark eyes filled with a deep darkness. He turned his head, and his peach blossom eyes shone brightly as he took credit. You hate him, I can see that. I let him get ahead before, but that was just a way to flatter him to his ruin. He and his mother are both idiots. I can crush him with a single move. Cordelia, Alaric knows you as well as I do. He can solve all your problems, and so can I. I can prepare a grand wedding for you, a 10-mile red dowry that will be even more enviable than the one below. Can you? Even if you just think of me as him, can you? Look at me. He gently pinched a corner of my sleeve, looking pitifully cautious, but the jealousy and gloom in his eyes betrayed his unwillingness. I shook off his hand and looked at him seriously. I will not treat anyone as a substitute for anyone else. I was not fooled by his pitiful act. You used me as a pawn, plotted against me and my Jiang family, publicly broke off my engagement to Alaric, let me be ridiculed by the entire capital, and supported a newcomer to seize the power of my Jiang family. Did you ever think it would come to this? The physician always mentions how difficult your situation used to be, but that was not my fault. My and the Jiang family's situation, however, was caused by you. My repeated heartaches and emotional breakdowns were also caused by you. You don't want the Jiang family, but you want the Jiang family's legitimate daughter. That is not how it works. I was born into the Jiang family, and I have enjoyed the wealth and glory that the family has brought me. Naturally, I must also bear the risk of rising and falling with the family. Vaughn. I said his name for the first time, my expression serious. Since Alaric's death had nothing to do with you, I will not reveal your identity. Take care of yourself. He seemed to have expected my reaction and didn't look too disappointed. As if he hadn't understood my words, his expression didn't change. He looked out the window vacantly. The Jiang family's daughter is also beautiful in her wedding dress. Cordelia, if you were to wear a wedding dress, you would surely be the most beautiful. I said. I have embroidered a wedding gown once. I will not do it a second time. Vaughn's eyes immediately darkened, and a surge of jealousy filled them. I felt like I was being watched by a venomous snake. Sensing my fear, he reined in his malice and said faintly, I rarely compare myself to Alaric, but sometimes I really envy him. Cordelia, I will not hide anything from you in the future. This spy is my sincerity. The spy would be dealt with by someone else. I felt that he hadn't listened to my words and didn't want to say any more. I left decisively. Even the Jiang family's daughter was married, and my mother began to worry about my marriage again, bringing me a pile of portraits to choose from. She pleaded with me, Cordelia, you should at least get engaged. The wedding will take a long time to prepare. I hesitated. Mother, do I have to marry someone? The Jiang family's daughter got married today, but she didn't seem very happy. Before marriage, she was the apple of her family's eye. After marrying the Prince of Shang, she became the Princess of Shang. Mrs. Jiang, her name erased. The consort, the Prince of Shang, and the many concubines in the prince's residence were not easy to get along with. There would be no shortage of troubles. My mother was puzzled. Of course, a life without marriage and children is incomplete. I was also puzzled. Do you have to marry someone to have a complete life? But I didn't want to discuss this with her further. I casually picked out a few portraits. These will do. My mother left, beaming. Sometime later, on the occasion of a cousin's birthday, she used his name to invite a group of young, talented men to the Prime Minister's residence. Among them were the few I had casually chosen. My mother handed me a round fan, pushed me behind a screen, and told me to be sure to pick the one I found most pleasing to the eye. I held the fan, half covering my face, and peeked out. There were so many handsome young men, I couldn't pick out the one I liked best. They all looked the same to me. As I watched, my mind began to wander. It was almost time for dinner. I wondered what the kitchen was making today. The clouds in the sky were beautiful. Was it going to rain? I wondered about the people I had sent out. "Miss, the madam wants you to pick a newly bloomed lotus flower for her," Beatrice reminded me, interrupting my thoughts. I looked at the lotus pond in the distance. A group of young men were reciting poetry beside it. My mother was afraid I wouldn't choose anyone. So she had found an excuse to make me walk past the most crowded area to attract their attention. I sighed in resignation, lifted my skirt, and walked around the corridor. As I rounded a corner, I was pulled into a nook. Vaughn was holding a familiar wedding gown and looking at me with anticipation. "Cordelia, you don't want to embroider another wedding gown, so I had this one fixed for you." It was the one the matron had hidden away. I don't know how he had managed to get it from her. He unfolded it. The bloodstain on the phoenix's wing had been covered with an embroidered red plum blossom, perfectly concealing the flaw. The cloud-like wings were now adorned with plum blossom petals, making it even more exquisite and beautiful than before. I subconsciously looked at his fair fingertips. They were covered in tiny red dots, the kind you get from being pricked by a needle. I couldn't believe it. "You embroidered this yourself? And you just learned how?" He was a little embarrassed and a little nervous at being exposed. He neither confirmed nor denied it, his eyes burning. "Cordelia, you don't have to embroider a second wedding gown, including the gown, and everything else. I can handle it. You don't have to worry you." "Miss, where are you?" Beatrice called out when she couldn't see me. I gave him a complicated look. Vaughn sensed that I was about to leave and pleaded with me. "Cordelia, miss?" I sighed and walked past him. I didn't have to look back to know the expression on the man's face. It would have instantly turned cold, and he would be staring at the group of noble sons outside, like they were dead. It reminded me of the rabbit I had as a child. It looked harmless, but it always wanted my attention. If I paid attention to someone else, and not it, it would get angry and stomp its foot. When the rabbit stomped its foot, it sounded like thunder, and the whole Jiang residence would shake. It was such a jealous creature. Later, Alaric had it sent away because he was also a possessive person. The small Jiang residence couldn't accommodate two big jealous creatures. But my little rabbit was healthy and lively, soft and cute. Vaughn was ill-fated, covered in wounds. He was sinister, jealous, and unscrupulous. I took a small boat and picked a bunch of lotus flowers. On the way back, the group of people in the distance were staring at me intently. Then many of them asked my cousin about my identity. Among them were several that my mother was particularly fond of. She was all set to receive the matchmakers. But after waiting and waiting, none came. When she inquired, she found out that they had all hastily arranged their engagements. My mother was puzzled. One or two is one thing, but how did they all get engaged so quickly? I didn't have to guess. It was Vaughn again. I had mixed feelings, but I was also relieved. At least I wouldn't be rushed into marriage so quickly before. My marriage to Alaric was a matter of course. I had never considered other possibilities. Later, I realized that marriage was not always something to look forward to. I became more and more confused. If in the end one can only be a woman in the inner quarters, why go through the hardship of studying from a young age, reading widely, and learning about the grandeur of mountains and rivers, the vastness of seas and lakes, only to be confined to a courtyard for a lifetime of struggle, wasting one's talents? In winter, we admire the winter plums. In summer, the green lotus. Eleanor and I went to a lake outside the city to escape the summer heat. The lake was surrounded by a sea of green lotus, a perfect place for appreciating them. and it was crowded with visitors. Eleanor took a boat to the middle of the lake to pick lotus flowers. I didn't feel like moving, it was too hot, so I stayed in the waterside pavilion, gently fanning myself, and watched her row further and further away. Then an unexpected person arrived. Serafina, her hair now in a married woman's style, walked into the waterside pavilion and said she wanted to say goodbye to me. I only then learned that she had been married to a minor official chosen by the Eastern Palace steward. The official was being posted outside the capital, and she had to go with him. I didn't believe her story. I don't have much of a relationship with you. If you're leaving, just leave. What is there to say goodbye to me about? Serafina's eyes were a little empty and numb. I remembered when I first saw her, she had turned her head, her eyes clear, a look of innocence on her face. I felt a little emotional. She broke off a willow branch from somewhere and placed it on the table in front of me. She said, "Sister Zhang, I'm older than you, so I'll take the liberty of calling you sister. I don't know many people in the capital. I broke off a willow branch and didn't know who to give it to. Then I thought of you, and coincidentally, I saw you here. I first came to the capital in the summer," Serafina said with emotion. "Time flies. This past year has been like a dream." She fell into a reverie. I was just a little herb girl from outside the mountains. I was considered pretty, and many sons of rich families admired me, but I never thought I would one day live in the imperial city. At that time, I went up the mountain to gather herbs and met His Highness. He was right. I saw his rich clothes and handsome face, and knew that this was a nobleman's son, and my opportunity had come. His Highness said he didn't remember the past. My father wanted to cure him, but I stopped him. If he remembered the past, I would have no chance. When Captain Leo came looking for him, I realized he was the noble crown prince. The whole village gathered around my house, watching me get into that luxurious carriage, full of envy. I was a little proud and a little lucky that I had found His Highness. You know the rest. His Highness was right. I am a person who loves wealth and glory, vain and selfish. But you were born with everything. How would you know that if I didn't hold on to him, I would never be able to leave that small mountain village? She became more and more agitated, but I was unmoved. She was just pursuing happiness. If she stepped on others in the process, they should see her as a pitiful, low-born person and understand and tolerate her. Serafina slowly calmed down. "Let's not talk about that. I'm leaving the capital tomorrow. This cup of wine is for you. A farewell to all of you." She raised her wine cup to me. It was the fruit wine on my table, which I had brought myself. In the end, I did not drink that cup of wine, because Vaughn suddenly appeared and blocked it for me. "Although it is fruit wine, if Cordelia has another cup, she will be drunk," he said with a smile. The clear liquid slid down, rolling over his crimson thin lips. Serafina looked at him in astonishment. I had long since gotten used to him popping up at any time, but his appearance this time still caught me off guard. I stood up abruptly and stared at his face. Serafina stammered, "Your Highness, what are you doing here?" Vaughn's eyelids were half closed, his expression cold and indifferent. "What? Can't I come and admire the lotus flowers?" Serafina was at a loss for words. Just as she was feeling uneasy, Vaughn's face grew paler and paler. He suddenly took out a pair of gloves from somewhere and put them on with a flourish. His fair, slender, and well-defined hands looked even more beautiful in the pure black gloves. Then he grabbed Serafina's neck, his voice chillingly cold. "This wine. You put an aphrodisiac in it?" He didn't hold back at all soon. Her face turned purple, and she was on the verge of death. Just as he was about to kill her, he seemed to remember something, and quickly let her go. He looked at me. My pupils dilated, and said with some regret, "Cordelia, I was too angry." "Don't be afraid of me. I'm not cruel. She is not dead. How you want to deal with her is up to you, Cordelia." He looked at me with trepidation. The drug was taking effect, and his face was getting redder and redder. He was both vicious and cruel, yet shy and fervent. A truly contradictory person. I didn't look at the dying Serafina on the ground. I walked over to Vaughn and examined him closely. My emotions were in turmoil. Finally, I said, "Stop pretending. You knew there was poison in it. You could have just poured it out. Why did you drink it?" To be overly attentive for no reason is to be either a thief or a scoundrel. I had no intention of drinking the cup of wine Serafina had offered me. I don't believe Vaughn was so foolish as to not guess that there was something in it. He was a little disappointed and muttered, "I risked my life to take the poison for you. Aren't you even a little bit moved?" Moved by what? Moved by his self-destructive attempt to get my attention? I couldn't help but let out a small puff of air. Didn't you ever think that what if she didn't put an aphrodisiac in it, but a deadly poison that kills on contact? Perhaps my proximity excited him. The drug was taking its toll. The tips of his ears were flushed, and his peach blossom eyes were full of a seductive charm, but his whole body exuded a darkness that seemed to want to devour someone. Then I would die, a worthless life, if not today, then someday. My fingertips twitched. I couldn't suppress the rising anger in my chest. I grabbed his collar, my movements rough. "You're a madman." He was much taller than me and leaned down to accommodate me. He seemed to think I was going to hit him or something and began to tremble with excitement. I rolled my eyes, dragged him outside to a secluded spot, and kicked him into the lake. I looked down at him. "Go sober up in the water and clear your head. A person who could survive the flood season of the Yun River should be a decent swimmer." He wouldn't drown. Vaughn did indeed climb easily onto the shallow bank and stand up soaked to the bone. He looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable, and then he began to laugh. The laugh of a madman. I flicked my sleeve and walked away. He was so annoying. He made me lose my composure, shattering the elegant and graceful demeanor I had cultivated in my bones. Back at the Zhang residence, I had Serafina woken up. I knelt down and asked her directly, "I'll give you 2 chances to confess. Who gave you the drug? Who put you up to drugging me?" She had no power, no connections, and no family in the capital. It wouldn't have been easy for her to get her hands on a colorless and odorless aphrodisiac on her own. Serafina was still confused. "What drug?" I said. "You have one more chance." She slowly came to her senses and answered cautiously. "Yes, I was the one who drugged you. So what? You didn't fall for it, did you?" I stood up and ordered indifferently. "Drag her away and sell her to the lowest class brothel. Find a more beautiful woman to replace her for that minor official." The servants did as they were told. Serafina probably hadn't expected me to be so decisive and finally panicked. "Don't. I'll talk. I'll tell you who wanted to harm you." I was not interested. Gag her. Serafina was gagged and couldn't even beg for mercy. She was taken away. I had someone investigate her recent contacts and traced it back to the Prince of Sheng. I also found out that she looked down on that minor official and had been having an affair with the Prince of Sheng for a long time. It seems the Prince of Sheng had promised her something. Perhaps to keep her as a concubine in his residence if she succeeded. That is why she had taken such a risk before leaving the capital. I was disgusted. I had someone spread a rumor to the Prince of Sheng that Serafina had somehow ended up in a brothel. The Prince of Sheng did go to see her, but he didn't buy her freedom. He just came to warn her not to reveal their relationship. Then, as he was leaving, he ran into the Princess of Sheng, who had been informed and had come to catch him. The Princess of Sheng was a large woman. She could have broken a few of the Prince of Sheng's bones just by sitting on him. She was also angry and beat him up in the street. The Prince of Sheng was carried back to his residence in full view of the public. I was in a private room in a tavern nearby, sipping tea, having accomplished my mission. I looked up and saw Vaughn in the window opposite me, smiling at me gently. Actually, it wasn't me who had lured the Princess of Sheng there. I just wanted someone to listen in on their conversation and confirm my earlier suspicions. A cunning dog like Vaughn. Even when he casually draws his bow and arrow, will not shoot just one prey. He will always kill 2, 3, or even 4 birds with one stone. The day after the Prince of Shang was carried back, he was impeached by a group of ministers. The reason was roughly, his conduct was improper, and he had brought shame to the royal family. The emperor was embarrassed and removed him from his posts in the 6 ministries, ordering him to reflect on his actions. The Prince of Shang's faction's arrogance immediately deflated. Vaughn held up a jade pendant and said apologetically, "The Prince of Shang is still useful. I'm sorry I can't kill him yet." The bandits the old physician encountered were indeed assassins in disguise, sent by the same force that ambushed Alaric. The Prince of Shang, I suspect, was incited by that force to be a pawn and to compete with me. So I let him be, hoping to lure out the snake and expose the people behind him. "Cordelia, I remember that your jade pendant was broken. I have learned to carve, and I have recarved the dragon pendant for you." In his slender fingers lay a pure white and lustrous jade pendant with a dragon design. It was exquisitely detailed, the coiling dragon carved with such skill that it seemed to be moving. It was certainly not as good as the work of a master who had been practicing for many years, but for a beginner, it was exceptionally fine. That jade carving master was unwilling to carve the same pendant again. So I learned from him. It may not be as exquisite as the original, but the jade is also a rare find in the world. I went to great lengths to obtain it. Vaughn wanted to place the pendant in my hand, but I kept retreating. My eyes were filled with complex emotions, and my mind was in turmoil. Finally, it all came down to one sentence. Why bother? I sighed softly. The living can never compete with the dead. His face turned deathly pale in an instant. "I know," he said. "I also know that you have been secretly sending people to find Alaric's remains." I looked at him intently. Vaughn smiled wryly. "I also know that I am not worthy to compete with him. I just hope that you don't hate me. The burial was too hasty, and too much time has passed. The vegetation has grown wild, and I can't find the place either. When the time is right, I will help you look. Inch by inch." I wanted to say that he didn't have to be so self-deprecating, but when I met his den peach blossom eyes, I couldn't speak. I didn't want to give him a false sense of hope. I did not accept the jade. Vaughn was stubborn. "That is right. It should have been a pair. The other one, the phoenix pendant, I dropped in the water. I will go and find it for you myself and give them both to you then." Or rather, obsessed. He searched from late summer to early winter. Inch by inch, he would squeeze out a little time each day to go to the Yun River, jump in, and search, a little at a time from the upper reaches to the lower reaches. He always managed to break through my defenses. I scolded him repeatedly, but he never gave up. Another winter, and the 10-mile plum grove was in full bloom. This year's plum blossom viewing banquet was hosted by the Empress. She had invited all the noble families. I wrapped myself in a thick robe and walked on the new snow towards the banquet. As I was passing a deserted path, I was stopped. I looked up and saw the Prince of Shang, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. He had put on a lot of weight. His eyes were fixed on my waist. "Miss Zhang is truly a rare beauty. You have grown even more beautiful." From behind me came a muffled, I turned and saw that Beatrice was being held by a guard. I looked at him with cold eyes, finding him as greasy as a pig. The Prince of Shang said, "Miss Zhang, it is cold. I'll take you to a warm place." He reached out to touch me. A plum blossom was thrown, and it flew like a blade, instantly severing his hand at the wrist. The Prince of Shang saw his severed hand fall to the ground, and only then did he feel the pain. He let out a pig-like squeal. Vaughn emerged from the plum blossoms. His exquisite face was framed by a fox fur collar, like a banished immortal, but the corners of his eyes and brows were tinged with moisture, covered in frost, cold and clear. The Prince of Shang looked at him in disbelief, then with extreme malice. "Third brother, you are so cruel." Vaughn smiled contemptuously. "Yes. What can you do about it?" The Prince of Shang threatened to tell his father, but he was in too much pain to walk. He had his guards go and call for help, and then said to Vaughn, "If you have the guts, don't leave." Vaughn paid him no mind and quickened his pace to my side. Cordelia! The Prince of Shang let out another cry of pain, drowning out Vaughn's voice. Vaughn frowned, turned, and slowly walked over to him. He looked down at the Prince of Shang, who was rolling on the ground. What a waste. You can't even stand a little pain. He lifted his foot and stepped on the wound of the Prince of Shang's severed hand. The Prince of Shang was in so much pain he almost fainted. He could only let out a weak whimper. Looking at the handsome, godlike man before him, he felt as if he were seeing a demon. The usually dull-witted man had a flash of insight. You are not Crown Prince Alaric. Then he became more and more certain. You are not Alaric, are you? How could Alaric be so cruel? Vaughn narrowed his eyes and, in an instant, made a decision. A cold light flashed from his sleeve, as if he were about to kill the man on the spot. What is going on? The Emperor's voice interrupted his next move. It turned out the Emperor was admiring the plum blossoms with a new favorite concubine nearby. It didn't take long for him to arrive. The Prince of Shang, seeing his savior, scrambled over and fell at the Emperor's feet. Father! He is not the Crown Prince! He is not Alaric! He wants to kill me! What is going on? The Emperor hadn't taken it seriously at first, but when he saw the blood and the Prince of Shang's severed hand, he realized the gravity of the situation, and his expression became solemn. The Prince of Shang embellished the story, insisting that the Crown Prince was not the Crown Prince, that he was possessed by a demon. The Emperor turned, his sharp, hawk-like eyes fixed on Vaughn. Is what he says true? I unconsciously squeezed my sleeve. The Emperor had always favored Alaric. If he knew the truth, Vaughn's fate would not be good. Vaughn knew this too, but now that suspicion had been raised, it could no longer be hidden. He sneered. It is true that I severed his hand. That is not what I asked. Vaughn was silent for a moment. The atmosphere was oppressive and heavy. The wind seemed to have died down, and the flower petals no longer fell. He chuckled. It is also true. Then he briefly explained the whole story, including his birth and the later coincidental disguise, calmly and concisely, as if he had rehearsed the confession countless times. When he finished, the Prince of Shang stared at him in shock, forgetting the pain in his hand. The others were much the same. The Emperor's expression was unreadable. So, you are actually my fourth son? Vaughn did not deny it. Then, the Emperor drew his sword and killed the new concubine behind him. To the surprise of everyone, even Vaughn showed a hint of surprise. The Emperor said, "The third is dead, so the fourth is the Crown Prince. Prince of Shang, this matter is not to be spoken of." It seems the Emperor was still the Emperor. Before, there was only Alaric, and outsiders thought that only Alaric was his son, and the others were subjects. Now it seems that in the Emperor's eyes, only the legitimate son was a son, and the others were subjects. The Prince of Shang's eyes widened. Father, you're just going to let it go. I've lost a hand. The Emperor scolded him. If you hadn't been so foolish, your fourth brother wouldn't have even bothered to cut you. Then he threw the still bloody sword in front of him. The men you brought, kill them yourself. The guard realized he had been caught in the crossfire and begged for mercy. The Prince of Shang's face turned pale, but he had no choice but to kill the guard who had been with him for years. Seeing the Emperor look over, I quickly stood in front of Beatrice. She has been with me since she was a child. I guarantee she will not speak out of turn. Vaughn, on the other hand, stood in front of me without a word, a few light coughs escaping his lips. The Emperor's expression softened. Cordelia, don't be afraid, Uncle believes you. Fortunately, the Emperor also favored me. The Prince of Shang gritted his teeth and looked at Vaughn, then at me with resentment. The Emperor was about to leave. Vaughn said, "Wait. I hear the Princess of Shang is with child. Congratulations, brother." Vaughn's dark eyes stared at the Prince of Shang, and I felt the hairs on his neck stand on end. His cold hand covered my eyes, his low voice reaching my ears along with the soft sound of a sleeve arrow being released. Then brother has no more use for this. Then came the Prince of Shang's pig-like squeal again. I am not one to be squeamish about blood and gore. I pushed his hand away and saw the Prince of Shang clutching his crotch and rolling on the ground again. I was shocked, To castrate his other son in front of the emperor. Even if he was favored, it would be hard to explain, right? My mind raced. I instantly understood. This was a test of the emperor's limits. A test of how far he would tolerate this newly emerged son. If it was within the limits, then it was fine. If it was beyond the limits, then he would be punished. I remembered what the old physician had once said. He had always focused on the result of a mission, and he was used to gambling with his life. A madman. A madman. The emperor was also shocked. He looked his cheap son up and down, but he wasn't angry. He actually laughed out loud. Good. Goodless enough. You're my son, just like me. In the end, he didn't punish him and just took the Prince of Shang away. He had won the gamble. The place was quiet again. Vaughn had no expression of joy. He had been cold and indifferent from the beginning. When he looked at me, however, his expression became serious. He fumbled in his sleeve, his voice gentle. Cordelia. The Empress is here, miss. Beatrice reminded me. Just as I was about to go and greet the Empress, Vaughn pulled me into a thicket of plum blossoms, hiding me, Beatrice. Seeing this, also hid. The Empress came alone. She immediately began to question him. Vaughn, what are you doing here? Instead of helping me receive the ministers, you're here admiring the flowers. You have quite a lot of free time. No wonder she had come alone. She couldn't let others hear her questioning of Vaughn. Vaughn had no expression. I will go over immediately. The Empress was still not satisfied. My cat is sick, and you haven't shown any concern. If it were Alaric, he would have found someone to treat it and comfort me. Before Vaughn could answer, she continued on her own. That is right. After all, a cruel and ruthless person like you, who could gouge out a leopard's eye and have it dismembered when you were just a few years old, has no kindness for living creatures. In that instant, the wind blew through the plum blossoms. Snow fell on the branches, the ice on the ground solidified, and under the silence of all things, a dark current flowed. Vaughn's peach blossom eyes had no light in them. His complex expression seemed to hold grievance, resentment, and sarcasm. All kinds of unknown dark thoughts swirled within. In the end, he just lowered his eyes. His expression still blank. He gently wiped the blood that had somehow reappeared at the corner of his mouth and replied indifferently, Fine, I will find a veterinarian for it. The Empress frowned. You are nothing like him. If you continue like this, your father will find out sooner or later. Your father loves Alaric the most. If he finds out you are an imposter, I will be implicated. He already knows, Vaughn said faintly. What? When? The Empress immediately panicked. Just now, before you came. The Empress's eyes widened. What was the Emperor's reaction? Vaughn said faintly. Nothing. I broke one of the Prince of Shang's hands and castrated him. My father had no reaction. He looked up, his eyes full of sarcasm. Only then did the Empress notice the blood on the ground. She was in disbelief. Even if your father had no reaction, if you hurt the Prince of Shang, the consort will come to me for trouble. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. The Empress suddenly began to cry. She raised her hand and slapped her younger son, crying, Why wasn't it you who died? Vaughn's already pale face, after being slapped hard, turned a little red. Coupled with the blood that had trickled from the corner of his mouth, he looked both wretched and tragically beautiful. He watched the Empress leave with a complex expression. The snow fell silently, the plum blossoms blooming in the darkness. I stood there, hesitant, not knowing whether to go out or not. Vaughn looked like he needed to be alone for a while. Before I could decide, he had composed himself and walked around the blooming winter plums to my side. Finally, no one interrupted him. From his sleeve, he took out a jade pendant. The white jade had a hint of purple inside, and the carving was exquisite. It was the phoenix pendant. Only then did I notice that his luxurious fox fur cloak was wet underneath, and the warmth of his body kept it from freezing. Water occasionally dripped from the sleeves. His dark hair and eyes were covered in frost. So he had finally found the phoenix pendant. He hadn't even had time to change his clothes and had rushed here to give it to me. Vaughn said. Cordelia, I found it. He wanted to place the phoenix pendant in my hand, but he accidentally touched something, and the whole piece of jade suddenly shattered. He froze. From his slender fingertips, the jade pieces fell one by one. He scrambled to pick up the pieces from the snowy ground, unconsciously trying to piece them back together. But after a long time, he moved, and they shattered again, falling all over the ground. He suddenly stopped. After a long time, he grabbed a corner of my skirt, his voice strained as if he were on the verge of a breakdown. Cordelia, I'm sorry. I pulled the corner of my skirt from his hand and tried to pull him up. Get up. He wouldn't budge. He was too heavy, and he suddenly bent over, coughing violently, spitting up mouthful after mouthful of blood. After a long time, he finally calmed down and sat on the snow, stiffly wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. His white robes were stained with blood. His dark hair spread out. He looked at me. Cordelia, wait for me for a few days. I will recarve a piece for you. I can learn. I learn everything quickly. He remembered something and suddenly lowered his eyes, speaking to himself calmly. That is right. I learn everything quickly. The only thing I was slow to learn was how to love and how to admit it. One step too late, and I am doomed forever. His calm demeanor was not like the usual pitiful and fragile expression he wore. But the sunlight shone around him, unable to warm his cold and desolate being. I remembered him in the Eastern Palace, just as calm, the floor covered with white paper with the character Alaric's written on it. Only the one stained with his own blood, the character Vaughn, was not far from him, as if it had been abandoned with him, as if it had created a space, isolated from the world, in the wind and rain. The Prince of Shang has rebelled. A cornered dog will jump over a wall. He has joined forces with the Prince of N to force the Emperor to abdicate. It seems the Prince of N is the one who has been secretly plotting a rebellion all along, sending assassins to kill Alaric and the physician. But he doesn't seem to want to get involved, probably because the time is not yet ripe, and he has been forced to act by the Prince of Shang. The Prince of An is a prince of a different surname. He was once a general and still has military power. He has surrounded the palace with his men, and the homes of several important ministers, including the Jiang residents, have also been surrounded. My father was anxious. The Princess of Shang came to the Jiang residence. She said she had bought a villa outside the capital and invited me to go and stay with her for a few months. I looked at her with suspicion. The Princess of Shang pulled me into a deserted corner. I owe the Crown Prince a favor. I promised him I would protect you. The capital is about to be in chaos. I'll take you out to avoid it. I was still skeptical. The Princess of Shang said nonchalantly, I was tired of being pestered by my family about marriage. The Crown Prince said he had someone to introduce me to. Someone rich, powerful, without a son, and who would die early, so I owed him a favor. What is your name? I asked her. My name is Felicity, she replied. Cordelia Jiang, I said. Felicity not only took me, but she also took my father, my mother, my grandfather, my aunts and uncles. The soldiers at the gate wanted to stop her, but she patted her slightly showing belly like a watermelon, and pushed it forward. The only son of the Prince of Shang. The only grandson of General Zhang. You try and stop me. If you stop me again, I'll throw myself on your sword. This time no one dared to stop her. They could only follow us, not letting us out of their sight. There were several carriages waiting at the gate. When I got on, I saw a small good luck charm lying quietly inside. It was from the temple on the mountain with thousands of stone steps. It had my name written on it, Aurora. Aurora, which means the sun. The sun, moon, and stars shine upon me. The darkness of the world cannot touch me. While the Prince of Shang was busy trying to overthrow the government, his wife, to repay a debt to his rival, took the important members of the Jiang family to a villa outside the city to escape the chaos. I don't know what the Prince of Shang was thinking, but the Prince of N was clearly not at ease. He sent men to patrol outside the villa. None of this affected her. Felicity could eat 3 bowls of rice at a meal, and that wasn't even enough. Every day, she would take me to roast meat, eat fish, and dig up sweet potatoes and winter bamboo shoots. The snowy scenery at the villa was exceptionally beautiful. The falling snow covered up much of the anxiety brought on by the power struggle, creating a sense of otherworldly tranquility. I stared at the snowy scenery in a daze. Felicity patted my shoulder. If the Prince of Shang gets lucky and doesn't die, and actually succeeds, then I'll be the Empress, and I'll protect you for the rest of your life. You don't have to worry. But he is such an idiot. It is unlikely he'll succeed. My gaze fell on her belly. If the Prince of Shang fails, and you are carrying his child, are you not worried? Felicity took a bite of roasted chicken. The Crown Prince promised me that even if his old man dies, the one in my belly will not be implicated, as one of the conditions for my protecting you. If you don't cut the weeds by the roots, they will grow again in the spring. But in Vaughn's eyes, it should be. So what if they grow again? Weeds are still weeds. They can't cause any real trouble. Felicity asked me, Cordelia, if you could choose, what kind of life would you like to live? What kind of life? As a noble lady for over a decade, I had never had a choice, nor had I ever considered such a question. The charcoal fire wafted the aroma of meat. In the fields outside the pavilion, the red sweet potatoes were quietly sprouting. I said, I would like to live a life of leisure, like a wandering cloud or a wild crane. To see the grandeur of the mountains and rivers, the vastness of the seas and lakes. Not to have to think twice before speaking or acting. Not to have to spend a lifetime in a courtyard, seeing the same scenery for decades. Not to have to worry about a husband's fickle heart, the new laughing while the old cries. Felicity let out a burp. When I was young, I also thought about that. I wanted to go to the border, to see the yellow sand stretching to the horizon, to live a full and unrestrained life, and it wouldn't have mattered if I never came back. She caressed her belly. I can't go anymore. This is it. In the end, it was the Prince of Shang who was defeated. He was pierced through the heart by a stray arrow and died on the spot. In the chaos, the Emperor also died. Vaughn brought the bound Prince of an and threw him at my feet. Cordelia, you decide how to deal with him. Looking at this man who had killed Alaric, I lowered my eyes. Tie a rock to him and throw him in the river. Returning to the capital, everything was in a state of disrepair. The old physician, with nothing better to do, came to visit every day, saying he missed his little turtle. Spring was coming, and he had to plant seeds. He didn't know if he would make it in time. My father was inspired by his talk of spring planting, and muttering, a new ruler, a new court, prepared to write his resignation and retire to the countryside. Vaughn was so busy, he didn't have time for the old men's complaints. He had ascended the throne, and as the new emperor, he had many things to resolve. My father's resignation was submitted again and again, and finally, it caught Vaughn's attention. Prime Minister Jiang, must you leave? My father was evasive. Yes. I want to go back to my hometown and farm. In fact, my father was worried about getting into trouble with the new emperor. After all, he hadn't expected the late emperor to die so suddenly, and the new emperor was his former son-in-law. He felt insecure and wanted to retreat to protect himself. Vaughn still hadn't announced his identity, so my father didn't know the truth. He put my father's resignation on hold and had me summoned to the palace. I entered the hall. The setting sun shone through the window onto the desk, which was piled high with memorials. The ink on the inkstone was still wet. The gauze curtain was gently lifted by the wind. No one. Just as I was about to leave, a cold presence surrounded me from behind, and I was pulled into an embrace. Vaughn said, Cordelia Jiang, I am now the emperor of a dynasty, with the wealth of the four seas, I can do whatever I want. Do you see this great hall? I want to lock you in here, with golden chains so that you can only see me every day, and no one else can distract your gaze. I will not allow anyone else to enter the hall. I will eat, sleep, and read my memorials, all by your side. In the future, you will bear me a prince. You don't have to teach him. No one is worthy of your effort. You just have to look at me every day. He held me tightly, his embrace cold as if he wanted to crush me into his bones. But I gently pushed him away. Vaughn obediently stepped back a few paces, but his gaze did not leave me. As he spoke, tears actually streamed from his peach blossom eyes. The first time I had ever seen him cry, I was at a loss. He was the one saying the outrageous things, but he was the one crying. The words that were on the tip of my tongue. But between you and me, there will always be Alaric. I ultimately did not say. Even as he cried, Vaughn's eyes were still filled with a possessive, morbid, and hopelessly dark obsession. In the depths of his eyes, there was a layer of cold, dark river water. He said, "But I can't do that." He lowered his eyes dejectedly, his dark hair falling with them. Felicity asked you what kind of life you like most. It was my idea. During this time, I haven't dared to see you. I was afraid that if I couldn't control myself, I would really lock you up. But if I did that, you wouldn't be you. You would hate me. How can I give you another chance to hate me? Vaughn tried to smile as he usually did, but the corners of his lips were full of bitterness. Cordelia Jung, I'm dying. You know that. My heart clenched again. Before my father passed away, he wrote an edict, making Alaric the emperor. You see, he seemed impartial, but in reality, he was unwilling to acknowledge my identity in front of the world. I can only exist under Alaric's name. He said he was afraid my mother would be criticized. He said that when my mother was young, she was also a bright and kind girl. It was the years of suppression in the deep palace that changed her. He told me not to blame her. I don't care if the world knows my name anymore at that time. I thought, if I forced you to stay by my side, you wouldn't be happy. You would be as unhappy as my mother. How can you bear to make the person you love unhappy? He looked at me with a fascinated gaze, and with great courage, he took my hand and held it tightly. Cordelia Jung, I like you so much. Every time I think I like you the most, that my feelings are about to overflow, I fall even more in love with you the next day. This is your father's resignation memorial. It has been approved. You may go, he said, stuffing a memorial into my hand. He gently pushed me out the door and said softly, "Go forward. Once you've gone, don't look back, leave before I regret it." The hall door closed. I stood there for a long time, clutching the memorial. I don't remember how I got back to the Jiang residence. My father was happy to receive the memorial, but also a little emotional. After all these decades, it is time to return home in glory. The Zhang family's hometown was the same place as physician Lin's. The two families were old friends, so my grandfather and he were very close. When the two old men were young, one studied for the imperial examinations, and the other studied medicine, vowing to make a name for themselves. Now, all they could think about was returning to their hometown. The day we left the capital, many people came to see us off. Eleanor had changed into a newly tailored riding outfit with arrow sleeves and held a red tasseled spear. Isn't it beautiful? After you leave, I'll go to the border with my older brother. The new emperor is wise and has allowed me to join the army. I smiled. It is beautiful. I'll grudgingly admit that today you are the most beautiful woman in the capital. Eleanor showed off a set of spear techniques. I'm not going to argue with you about who is more beautiful anymore. I'm definitely going to get ugly at the border. She laughed with abandon. Felicity, her belly already quite prominent, brought me a large bag of snacks. Eat these on the road. Don't go hungry. The Prince of Shang was dead, but the new emperor had kept his title and passed it on to the child in the Princess of Shang's belly. Regardless of gender, the child would be a prince or princess. Now, Felicity had skipped the stage of dealing with her mother-in-law and sisters-in-law, and had become a princess dowager. She was carefree and had grown rounder and more prosperous. Seeing Eleanor's spear and clothes, she was very envious. "When you go to the border, can you send me some letters and tell me about the local customs there?" Eleanor said. "Of course. What is your name?" "Felicity." "My name is Eleanor." Physician Lin took out a few herbs from his precious little medicine box and gave them to me. "These are all treasures I found by chance while traveling through the mountains and seas. They can save your life in a critical moment. Take them, and keep them safe. Don't use them." The unlucky old physician couldn't leave after all because the new emperor still needed him. The old man looked at us with envy. "Remember to tell my son not to forget to feed the turtle." After saying our goodbyes, we set off. The carriages began to move one after another. I was the last to get on the carriage. Before I did, I finally looked back one last time. On the high city wall stood a lone figure. It was too far, too blurry to see clearly. Later, as the years passed, looking back, I finally understood. That was the last time I saw Vaughn. Epilogue. Vaughn's perspective: the living can never compete with the dead. But he had to try. In his entire life, what had he not fought for? Vaughn had known his identity since he was a child. He was the Queen's younger son, a being who could not see the light of day. The time he was hidden in the Lin residence was one of the few carefree and precious periods of his life, a memory to be cherished for a lifetime. Physician Lin was old and had long since grown tired of the intrigue and precariousness of the imperial city. He was thinking of retiring soon, finding a chance to return to his hometown, buy a few fields, raise some pets, and when he had free time, travel around, see the local scenery, and compile a pharmacopoeia. The old man both respected him as a prince and loved him as a junior. He would take him fishing. They never caught a single fish, but on the way back, feeling a little disappointed, they would wander around, and he found him a little turtle. He said happily, "Your Highness, in the future, I will take you back to my hometown. We'll dig a small pond in the courtyard to raise it." The fields were bought, the courtyard was built, and the pond was dug. Physician Lin successfully retired, but on that day, the Queen came. On the pretext of visiting her family, she took him back to her maternal clan. When he left the Lin residence, he looked back and saw the old man wiping away tears. He was still young then, and didn't understand why he was crying. Seeing his biological mother, he was very excited. He didn't know how to express the innate love and admiration he felt for her. He could only watch her silently and follow her closely. Unfortunately, the Queen did not like this clingy younger son who followed her everywhere. She was annoyed about how to place him and frowned in frustration. "Can't you find something of your own to do? Why do you follow me around all day?" Alaric would never be as clingy as him. The Queen was about to return to the palace. She thought of a good idea. She arranged for the young Vaughn to be placed in a secret guard unit of her maternal clan. The new recruits were about the same age as him. He wouldn't be discovered there, and in the future, he could be a body double for Alaric and take a knife for him. The Queen was born into a wealthy family and had limited knowledge. She only knew that the secret guards were very powerful, but she didn't know the hardships involved. The young Vaughn had only been with his mother for a few days before he was sent to a cruel training base. In just a few months, his childishness was worn away, and his body was covered in countless scars. The leader could guess his identity, so he had him wear a mask to prevent anyone from seeing his resemblance to Crown Prince Alaric. At first, the Queen felt a little guilty, so a few months later, she found an opportunity to visit him. The young Vaughn was fighting a leopard with a group of children. He had already learned to observe his surroundings, so when the Queen appeared in the corner, he noticed her immediately. He was very excited and fought with extra vigor. While everyone else was backing away, he was the only one who rushed forward, clinging to the leopard, nearly being thrown off several times. It was extremely dangerous. In a moment of inspiration, he gouged out the leopard's eye, and then organized the others to successfully subdue it. Usually at this time, the leader would praise them. He was a little shy and secretly looked at the corner with anticipation, only to see the queen retching and looking at him with disgust. He was at a loss, and also a little confused. The malice from a close relative was particularly heart-wrenching. Later, he understood that a cruel and ruthless person is not liked by others, and even a biological mother will be disgusted. He regretted it a little. He should have held back. The next time his mother came, he would pretend to be a little more obedient, a little kinder. As for being completely unruthless, such a person could not survive in the secret guard camp. But the queen never came again. A day, 2 days, a year, 2 years, until he was sent to Alaric's side. Seeing the queen's loving smile towards Alaric, he realized that his mother could also be gentle and kind. But just not to him. He thought he would be resentful, jealous, but in fact, he felt nothing. No love, no hate, no strong emotions. Without realizing it, he had lost the desire and ability to love and be loved. His emotions were dull, rusted. Now, he was a cold-hearted person, or rather, a cold-hearted strategist. He moved step by step, secretly accumulating his own power when no one else was aware. He did not want to be a person who could not see the light of day, to die in a filthy corner, with no one knowing his name, no one knowing he had ever existed. Alaric had a childhood sweetheart, a very beautiful young girl. In public, she was eloquent and well-versed in the classics, very proper. In private, she would burn books on female conduct, and with a Zelshun Zhaozi argue with her matron in an orderly manner. I have my own eyes. I see mountains as mountains, seas as seas, and people's hearts as people's hearts. If I don't understand something, I can look, think, and learn. I don't need them to tell me what to do. The matron said, Miss, you can say this to me, but you can't say it outside. The little girl pouted. Alaric grew up with her, and in the places they couldn't see, he also grew up with her. Alaric liked her very much. He did not like her. He did not like anyone. He only needed to climb up. He did not need to like anyone. Life is unpredictable, and fate is fickle. No one would have thought that a person like Alaric would also die. He died so suddenly, so lightly, that it made one think of the saying, "The heavens are jealous of talent, and the talented die young." Perhaps regardless of status or character, human life is equally fragile. He also fell into the Yun River. He was lucky to have survived. He struggled to climb ashore, and then collapsed from exhaustion. If Serafina hadn't saved him, then he wouldn't have been in any danger. Serafina took off his mask, saw his face, and still took him back. He woke up in a strange place, seeing strange people. He didn't know if the assassins were still nearby, so he feigned amnesia to get information. After confirming that the environment was safe, he stayed there for a month to recuperate. The woman was ambitious. He could tell at a glance, so he wasn't surprised to hear her stop her father from treating his amnesia. He didn't care what she thought. He would kill her whole family when he left. He was indeed a cruel and ruthless person. Every day, he would secretly search for Alaric, who had also fallen into the river. He never found him, until Leo and his men came, kneeling down and saying, "Greetings, Crown Prince." That day, he found him. He found Alaric's bones. Even in death, Alaric clutched a jade pendant in his hand. No one knew what Alaric's last thoughts were. He buried him on the spot and threw the jade pendant into the water, sneering. "He is dead. She is not yours anymore." Since he had been mistaken for Alaric, he went along with it. On the way, he had already devised a plan to establish a firm foothold in the shortest possible time. No one could pretend to be someone else forever. And besides, he didn't want to live under Alaric's name forever. He had to gather as much power as possible before his identity was discovered. At the same time, it was best to break away from Alaric's direct subordinates to avoid being discovered. The Zhang family was the first to go. They were the ones who needed to be guarded against and pushed away the most. When he returned, He used Serafina as an excuse to break off the engagement with Cordelia Jung. He didn't like anyone. He only needed to climb up without looking back. The emperor did not agree, so he knelt before the throne for several days. He deliberately chose a rainy day to make it look more resolute. As for whether his injuries would worsen from being in the rain, it didn't matter. He wouldn't die anyway. He was already numb to pain. That day, dark clouds covered the sun. She came with an umbrella. He sensed her before she even got close. She held the umbrella for him. No one had ever held an umbrella for him. What was he thinking then? He wasn't thinking anything. His mind was blank. He only knew that she was very close to him. This was the closest she had ever been to him in all these years. He tried not to look back at her, but the dark clouds, the misty rain, and the vast hall all seemed to fade away. Only she was there, her presence not aggressive but never leaving him. Vaughn silently moved out from under the umbrella, his back straight, letting the rain beat down on him. He successfully broke off the engagement, but his heart felt heavy. This heaviness reached its peak when she stood on the cliff, facing the wind, and began to cry. She rarely cried. He knew that. She had always been a strong-willed person, and Alaric had protected her well. She rarely cried, but when it was his turn to stand by her side, it didn't take long for him to make her cry. The heaviness in his chest turned into a heart-wrenching pain, but the strategist's instinct drove him to continue acting. If his identity was discovered, he might not survive. Later, she exchanged the things for copper coins and scattered them in the street with great fanfare. He was a little surprised, but then he thought it was to be expected. She was Cordelia Jung. When Cordelia Jung chose a zither, she didn't choose the guqin that the nobles considered elegant. She chose a beautiful Congo. When Cordelia Jung was still a child, she burned the books on female conduct that others revered as gospel. At her 1-year-old Drajo banquet, she didn't pick any of the things on the table. She hugged the most handsome crown prince next to her. She was the most admired noble lady. Her every word and action was steeped in etiquette, elegant and poised. But at the same time, she also had a rebellious streak, a penchant for beautiful things, and a bit of a temper. He and Alaric both knew her well, but Alaric liked her very much. He did not. He didn't like anyone? Really? If he didn't like her, why did he know her so well? For a long time, he didn't dare to get close to her, until the plum blossom viewing banquet. When she played a piece on the Congo, her slender hands plucking a branch of red plum and tucking it into her hair. The vibrant plum blossoms. Such a beautiful woman. He suddenly remembered her learning a new instrument for a beautiful Congo. Heard Zelshun Zhaozi arguing with the matron, all her different sides. From his teens to his 20s, she was the only girl of the right age he had ever seen. How could he not like her, Vaughn? How could he not like Cordelia Jung? He clearly liked her very much. Why was he afraid to admit it? In the end, he did look back. His head suddenly ached. His heart also ached, and all his old wounds hurt. The pain was so intense that his vision blurred. Looking at her resolute back, it was too late for the strategist to realize he was in love. He found his past pursuits to be meaningless. Now she was his only plan. But winning someone back requires a price. It doesn't matter. If you like someone, you have to fight for them. He wanted her love, even if it meant pretending to be Alaric for the rest of his life. He found an opportunity, pretended to have regained his memory, and tried his best to make it up to her, to get close to her. Even if she was indifferent, he was willing. The wound on his head never seemed to heal. Whenever it was about to, he would tear it open again, making himself look pitiful. But Cordelia Jung was a soft-hearted person. This trick did have some effect. That day, she softened and advised him to give her up. How could he give her up? He said. None of them are my Cordelia. My Cordelia, he savored the words secretly overjoyed. He told himself again that it didn't matter if he had to pretend to be Alaric for the rest of his life. Then came the emperor's birthday banquet. The Prince of Sheng, a toad lusting after a swan's flesh, actually wanted the emperor to grant him a marriage with Cordelia. The emperor would most likely not agree. He would not let the Jiang family become part of the Prince of Sheng's faction. But the emperor was drunk, and Vaughn dared not take the risk. So he secretly gave himself a palm strike, spat out a mouthful of blood, and successfully interrupted the banquet. The old physician had not known it was him at first. He had been called in to check his pulse, and he had known at once that he was not Alaric. He was Vaughn. Alaric's body would not be so broken. The old man was very angry and argued with him for a while before leaving in a huff. He knew someone had entered the hall. After the old man left, he was about to go and silence them when he turned the screen and saw her staring at him in astonishment. He couldn't hide it anymore. He had a premonition. Sure enough, she had guessed it. In that instant, he was afraid, panicked, and also had a secret, joyful feeling. He solemnly, word by word, told her his name, Vaughn. Cordelia Jiang, remember this. My name is Vaughn. He had the old physician tell her his life story. A story of suffering told by oneself seems contrived. A story of suffering told by others in fragments is what is truly shocking. He wanted her to soften. He was betting on her softening. The queen was tied to him by self-interest, the physician by deep affection. They knew his identity and would never reveal it. But she was different. She had been plotted against by him. If she went to her father or the emperor and told them the truth, he didn't know what his fate would be. If the emperor punished him, his power was not yet enough to resist. He was gambling with his life on her heart. He didn't care if he won or lost. Victory was sweet, but defeat was also met with grace. She seemed to have softened, but she did not accept him. She had always been clear-headed. What was wrong was wrong. She would not be swayed by pity. It didn't matter. There was still a long way to go. He would slowly break down her defenses. He learned embroidery for her, dealt with those unsuitable marriages for her, and drank a cup of poisoned wine for her. She was not easy to fool. She could see that he had drunk the wine on purpose. She was angry. She was actually angry. Vaughn couldn't help but laugh. As he laughed, he thought of the physician's diagnosis, that he was at the end of his rope and wouldn't live for many more years. He thought, so be it. He didn't want her to love him too much. After all, if he died, she would be sad. He only hoped that she wouldn't hate him. That would be enough. Oh, and he also hoped that she would remember him, even longer than she remembered Alaric. She sighed. The living can never compete with the dead. At that moment, his heart was like dead ashes, but no one, and no words could easily defeat him. He had to try. Alaric was born with everything. He was born with nothing. If he didn't fight, he would have ended up as a pile of bones in the mouth of a wild beast. Later, the Prince of Sheng and the Prince of An rebelled. He suppressed the rebellion and became the new emperor. No, it should be said that Alaric became the new emperor. He was just using his name. But he no longer cared if the world called him Alaric or Vaughn. As long as the person who mattered knew who he was, that was enough. His mother, since she wanted to be the empress so badly, could continue to be. Until she died, he never made her the empress dowager, and he watched with cold eyes as she became the laughingstock of the world. His Cordelia wanted to leave the capital and go with the Jiang family. He was so reluctant to let her go. But if he forced her to stay, she wouldn't be happy. The Jiang family no longer trusted him and wanted to withdraw from the capital. Even if he gave her the highest honor, without her family behind her, she wouldn't feel secure, and he was dying. The old physician had cursed him, saying he had shortened his life by several years. He was dying. How could he hold her back? He wanted to leave with her, to stay by her side in the last few years of his life. But he couldn't leave. He was the new emperor. Besides, a girl like her would have many people willing to stay by her side for a lifetime. If he did that, there would be nothing memorable about him. A strategist is also an ambitious person. His ambition was her. He didn't need her to love him, but he wanted her to remember him for the rest of her life. He saw her one last time, hugged her for the first time, let her and the Zhang family leave, and told her, "Go forward. Don't look back." When he was young, he looked back and saw the old man wiping away tears. He remembered it to this day. When he was a young man, he looked back and saw her with a flower in her hair. It stayed with him for a go forward, don't look back. Epilogue: a minor character's perspective. Emperor Zhao, whose name was Alaric, passed away after only 5 years on the throne. He had no empress, no consorts, and no children. He passed the throne to a nephew. The old physician, surnamed Lin, who had been responsible for keeping Emperor Zhao alive, was overwhelmed with grief at having to see a younger man die before him. He was also old, and not long after the emperor's death, he also passed away. In the end, he never got to go back and feed his little turtle. After a summer rainstorm, the small courtyard was filled with the fragrance of the earth. Someone knocked on the door. Beatrice opened the door. "Who is it?" Outside stood a strange young man, who looked a little simple. "Sister Beatrice, I am Leo's younger brother. My name is Lake. I am now the commander of the Imperial Guards. I am here to see your lady. I have something to give her." He took out his identity token, and Beatrice let him in. The courtyard was not large. A long corridor led to the back, where a lush green tree stood in a corner. Under the tree sat a beautiful woman in white. Her eyes were bright, and her demeanor was graceful and elegant. Lake knew her. She was the great scholar Jiang. Her name Cordelia. She was a famous writer, and in the future, she would surely be remembered for generations. But she had never married. Cordelia Jiang looked up, her voice beautiful. "You are Leo's brother?" Lake scratched his head shyly. "Don't I look like him? My brother is guarding the Imperial City and can't leave, so he sent me." Cordelia Jiang's voice was gentle. "You do. What have you come to deliver?" Lake had come to deliver the news of Vaughn's death. Her hand trembled. Lake brought out an urn. "This is what the master asked me to give you, his ashes. The master had us search the banks of the Yun River, inch by inch, and we found His Highness Alaric's remains." Emperor Zhao's name was Alaric. No one knew that it was the master who worked day and night caring for the people. Until his death, only a few of us close officials knew his identity. In the Imperial Mausoleum, it is also His Highness Alaric's remains. Miss Zhang, no one remembers the master's name. You must remember him." As Lake spoke, he began to cry. "Physician Lin is also gone. I have been traveling with these 2 urns from winter to summer. The plum blossoms have withered, the snow has melted, and the grass has turned green, and only now have I arrived here. To deliver a person's ashes to his beloved. To deliver a person's ashes, a belated homecoming." It was the same place where the old physician had said to the young Vaughn, "Your Highness, in the future, I will take you back to my hometown." The scenery was indeed beautiful, with clear mountains and rivers, blue skies and white clouds, vast fields and simple and honest people. Lake wanted to hand her the box, but Cordelia Jiang did not take it. She stared at the urn, her eyes filled with a whirlwind of emotions. Finally she said, her voice strained, "He is still playing games with me even in death. He could have made his identity public. As the emperor of a country, how could he not be able to do something so simple? Just like that cup of poisoned wine. He just wanted to make her soften. He didn't care if others knew his name. He wanted her to never forget the character Vaughn, for the rest of her life." Seeing that she wouldn't take it, Lake put down the urn and ran. He went out the door, then jumped over the wall and came back, secretly watching her reaction. He and the Imperial Guards were personally trained by the master. The master had instructed them to obey Miss Zhang's orders in the future, and to protect her. In fact, the new emperor was also personally chosen by the master, someone who was more or less related to the Zhang family. Lake left, and Cordelia Zhang had no reaction. She just stared at the box on the table with hatred. The character Vaughn was written on it in red ink, like blood. She was inexplicably angry. It looked as if she wanted to smash the box. She raised her hand and began to frantically smash the things in the courtyard. Vases and jars shattered all over the ground, but the urn in the middle remained untouched. Cordelia Jiang had always been elegant and composed, but Vaughn could always make her lose her composure. She hated him to death. The plum tree in the courtyard was also quietly bearing fruit. It was almost time for the green plums to ripen again, but they were tart, both sour and astringent. This plum tree had been planted when she had first moved in. The small sapling, then less than a person's height, could now cover half the courtyard. 5 years had passed in a flash. She was now 20, and in a few months, she would be the same age as Vaughn when he had stood at the Prime Minister's residence. A cold figure. In a little over a dozen months, she would be the age Vaughn was when he had pushed her out of the hall and told her not to look back. She had looked back then, and now that she thought about it, that was the last time she had seen him. Epilogue. Alaric's perspective, Crown Prince Alaric, was a man of noble character, a gentleman, an immortal banished to the mortal realm. He always was, until he died. Alaric excelled in rites, music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy, and mathematics. He was refined, benevolent, and deeply loved by the court and the people. He was a qualified heir. The only thing that made him unqualified was that he wanted to be with one person for a lifetime. There was no other reason, just the thought of Cordelia, in the future, having to deal with a flock of women like his mother, and probably not having much time for him, was something he could not accept. Since childhood, Cordelia's eyes had only been for him, and it should remain so in the future. He was the same. The Crown Prince was benevolent. It was true, but his benevolence had a sharp edge. Otherwise, how could he have kept all his other brothers in check? But his sharpness would unconsciously disappear when he was with Cordelia. When Cordelia was 7 or 8, she would secretly eat the malt sugar Beatrice had bought for her, and a loose baby tooth would get stuck. In public, she would keep a straight face, but her steps would quicken, and she would run to the Eastern Palace and cry in his arms. "Brother Alaric, I'm going to be a toothless monster." The Crown Prince, who had grown up in the deep palace and was already a mature teenager, usually had no emotion in his beautiful peach blossom eyes. Even when he had just personally executed a spy who had tried to climb into his bed, there was no ripple in his eyes. But when he saw the little Cordelia, his eyes softened. He nonchalantly hid the bloody dagger behind his back, and with his clean hand patted her head and said gently, "What is wrong?" "Brother Alaric." The little Cordelia showed him her gappy smile and began to cry. "My teeth don't want me anymore. Will I be like my grandfather and have to drink porridge every day?" The Crown Prince didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he still explained to her seriously, "That tooth is old and has retired. A new tooth will come to take its place." The little Cordelia reluctantly believed him. When she got a little older, Cordelia didn't have as much time to go to the Eastern Palace. Her family's upbringing was extremely strict, with zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting scheduled from morning to night. The Crown Prince was also very busy. They were both people who carried heavy responsibilities, but no matter how busy he was, the Crown Prince would still find time to visit her. One day, he saw her arguing with the matron. After the matron left, Cordelia saw him and complained. "The matron said I can't say those things to other people, but I'm going to say them anyway." Then she explained what had happened. The Crown Prince smiled and gently wiped the dust from her little face. The next day, he brought her a new set of books on female conduct. When Cordelia Jiang opened it, under the serious and old-fashioned cover were fantasy novels. The Crown Prince had stayed up for many nights, picking out interesting stories for a girl of her age from the vast sea of books. All of them were easy to understand and had a profound meaning. When she got a little older, Cordelia Jiang found a little rabbit and kept it in her courtyard. She was fascinated by it and would watch it eat and sleep every day. The rabbit grew more and more attached to her, and also very jealous. Whenever Cordelia, Jiang, and Alaric stood together, the rabbit would stomp its foot with a thump to express its dissatisfaction. After a few times, Alaric looked at the stupid rabbit with a half-smile. This rabbit is quite smart. It understands people. The next day, on Cordelia Jiang's dining table, there was an extra dish of spicy rabbit head. She ate it with relish. After she finished, she realized the rabbit was gone and thought she had eaten her little rabbit. Cordelia Jiang, who had grown up to be composed and calm and had not cried in a long time, burst into tears. That night, she unpicked the ginger flower on the cloak she had given to Alaric as a birthday gift and replaced it with an ugly piece of ginger. The third day, Alaric came to apologize. He coaxed her for a long time and even brought her a new rabbit before she was appeased. The new rabbit was even cuter, not jealous, and only knew how to eat cutely. The fourth day, Cordelia Jiang inadvertently found out that the rabbit head on the dining table had been bought by the cook, and that her rabbit had run away and had now come back from the grass. However, the old rabbit had fallen out of favor and was sent away by Alaric. Later, they were engaged as a matter of course. As the ceremony for her to be officially named the crown princess approached, the Yun River flooded, and Alaric took a group of officials to provide disaster relief. Cordelia Jiang went to see him off at the city gate. Just as he was about to get on his horse, the crown prince patted her head, his voice gentle and clear. Cordelia, don't work too hard on the wedding gown. It will hurt your eyes. When I come back, I'll secretly help you embroider it. The summer sun shone down, illuminating his handsome features and his white robes. He was a man of extraordinary talent, a peerless gentleman, as radiant as a god.